Good evening. Welcome to the Norfolk Board of Selectmen's meeting of Tuesday, January 8th. I am joined here at the table by my associates, Mr. Palumbo and Mr. Calcutt. My name is Jim Lehan. To my left, we have Susan Jacobson, our executive assistant. Please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting is being both audio and videotaped in compliance with Mass Open Meeting laws and can be seen on NCTV and the YouTube connection. We have one order of business this evening, and that is to discuss the candidates that we interviewed last Thursday and see where we go. So if I may, just before we begin that process, I just have one other, it's not business per se, but just something to talk with my colleagues. We are in the middle of budget time, and we are the town administrator for budgets right now. So we have a meeting on January 29th, and we have a meeting the week following scheduled. So if you're in agreement, we should have all the budgets in and fairly well solidified in terms of their requests. What I would suggest, rather than each of us working individually and not knowing the whole picture, I would suggest that we bring in half of the departments on one evening and half of the departments in on another evening, and let's talk about their budgets as a committee, if you're agreeable.
Sure.
What do you think? It might mean for a lengthy evening.
I was about to say, how many departments are we talking?
Some of the budgets would be very brief, will not be time consuming, so they're probably, I would only bring in the major departments.
Right.
Police, fire, I don't think we need to bring in library, I don't think we need to bring council on aging. Schools, we can deal with separately. So we're really talking about police, fire, town hall, DPW. That'd be 4 departments.
Okay.
So we could do 2 one meeting and 2 the next meeting, because we have to get ready to put this together and move on to the advisory board. And I just think it would, we're a 3-man show here, not a 1-man show. I thought it would be helpful if we did it collectively rather than individually. So, but I will defer to what you guys want to do.
I think that makes sense.
The only other urgent thing I think we have on the 29th is the grievance.
That's going to be done in March.
Oh,
Right,
it's
Scott?
moved?
It's moved.
Yeah,
Oh.
the business agent isn't available.
Okay.
We may have a couple of quick poll hearings for the 29th.
Well,
And
that'll take 5 minutes.
we have to open the warrant and pick a town meeting date.
That'll take
Right.
3 minutes, I hope. All right, so, is that agreeable?
Absolutely.
So we'll, I know you're working with DPW and I'm working with Town Hall and
So who do you want in for the first meeting?
I don't have a bias. Do you gentlemen have a preference?
I'm not getting any sound out of mic number 4.
Is that me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Don't tell me I have to start all over again. I don't have to start all over again, do I?
No, no.
Okay. Don't scare me. I'm not sure I can remember that.
Jim, Scott just mentioned Matt Hafner for facilities as a budget you might.
Oh, yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. Actually, that's a very important, well, they're all important, but that's a fairly extensive budget, so, yeah.
So
You
Jim,
guys have a preference?
so the dates, so the 29th,
29th,
Yeah.
and then it's the following Tuesday, I believe.
a Monday,
Right.
Monday the
Oh, we
4th.
changed it to
Switch to
Monday.
Monday.
Yeah, following Monday.
Right.
That's correct.
And then the next meeting after that is the 18th, right?
Correct.
Monday the 18th.
Right, but we need to get the budgets fairly well framed up.
Actually-
And obviously, Mr. Lindmark will join us for those meetings, and I'll ask him to get the budgets out in advance, a package out to all of us, so that we have it in advance of that meeting.
Just check me on this, but I've got the 18th written for a meeting date, but that's President's Day, yeah?
Right, Nancy brought that up today. I had that on my notes to discuss with you. So Town Hall is closed on President's Day. I
Okay?
didn't know if you still wanted to have your meeting. I don't know if there's anything that prohibits us from having a meeting.
I don't think there is, that I know of. As long as it's open and accessible to the public.
Well, I would open, I would, just like we
We all
do
have a
for
key,
tonight.
we could do that, yeah. That all right with you guys, to still meet the 18th? I mean, anyone taking is that school vacation week?
It is, I think.
That probably would impact you more maybe than us.
Just bring up 3 little seats right here, would be all set.
As long as they're on your side of the table.
Yeah.
I'll bring snacks.
I'll tell you what, then I'll bring in my 9 grandchildren,
There
we'll
we
put them on
go.
that side of
It'll
the
be a
table,
party.
and then you and I will go home.
No, that should be okay still.
Is that okay? Jeff, okay with you?
Yeah, let's leave it there for now. I mean, if we decide to do
We
something
can, if
different
on the
here,
4th, we feel there's a
Yeah.
better plan, then we can.
That's fine.
Sure, okay.
That's fine. Okay.
So we'll plan on those 2 dates, the
29th.
29th.
So who do you want in on the 29th?
Police and fire, both
Police
raise
and
their
fire,
hands.
both raise their hand. So we'll do police, fire, and let's do Matt.
And Matt, okay?
How's that? That agreeable?
And on the 4th, we'll
We'll
do
do
Town
DPW.
Hall and DPW. Okay.
Town hall. Is there anyone else? What am I missing?
Bob Bullock?
Yeah, Bob Bullock.
You want
His
him
is
in
not a
with
big budget. I
Town
mean, that-
Hall and DPW?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. Bullock, I don't think we need to have the library budget in. That doesn't change much in the Council on Aging. You're more closely related
Yep.
to that. Do we need to have
No,
that? Okay.
I don't think so.
And the schools, I've already visited with schools, and she's on medical leave
Right.
now anyway.
Right.
So I know where she is with her budget, but we'll have to see how that gets funded. Maybe we have a clue, so, at this point in time. Okay, so, is that okay?
Yeah, we don't need to do it as part of the budget, but I think at some point we'll have Barbara Bartholomew come before us. I've been working on some things with her
Okay.
on
Want
the
to have her come in
historical
on one
side
of
of
those 2
things.
meetings?
Yeah, I mean, Sue, the information I gave you, has Jim seen that yet?
For the
information?
glass cases?
Well, there was also, as far as the park, Fales Park, and some other things.
No,
Is-
because
is
I
it
thought
in-
we were gonna
is it
bring it
here
in at a
That I
meeting.
haven't read yet, that you gave me?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just under new business, I was planning on bringing that up, but, so we can separate it from the budget. I don't know that it has to be part of the
Well,
budget.
I mean, we can do it either evening you want. You want to check with Barbara and see which one works for her?
We can do that. I want to make
And
sure
we'll
this,
just-
our schedule allows to. We're pretty full here at some of these upcoming meetings, yeah.
All right. So, to the reason we're here this evening. First, let me just review the process briefly on how we got to where we are here today. When Mr. Hathaway announced that he was moving to the beautiful country of Maine, we began the process of thinking through how we would approach this. And the effort we wanted to put forth was to try and condense this in a manner that we didn't have a long vacancy, if you will, in the town administrator position, especially with town meeting, our annual town meeting in May. We were hoping that we could get someone involved towards the tail end of the process, and this board unanimously agreed to work with Jack. Jack agreed to work with us, and we were able to come up with a deadline. And from that, we formed a screening committee, and I want to thank that group here this evening. On that committee was Mr. Bugby, former selectman, Tom Doyle, who is chair of the Norfolk School Committee, Mike G., who was chair of the KP School Committee, Mike Kaliza, who was a ZBA member, Chief Stone from our police department, Chief Bushnell from our fire, and a special thanks to Susan Kelly, who was a volunteer and, more importantly, agreed to chair that group. I'm sure that was an effort of love to bring that group to consensus, so thank you for that effort. They reviewed somewhere between 35 and 40 resumes. I don't honestly know the exact number. You may, Susan, but I'm told it's somewhere in that range. From that group, they chose 8 candidates to conduct personal interviews. From that group of 8, the committee voted to present to the board 3 finalists. We interviewed those 3 finalists last Thursday. The resumes, just as point of information received by the consultant and shared with the screening committee, are confidential and are not available to the public, nor are available to this board. None of us have seen those resumes. We have only seen the resumes of the 3 candidates that were presented to us. Only the screening committee has seen the full number of candidates available. We interviewed those 3 candidates last Thursday, and this evening we're going to discuss those candidates. And the process will be as follows. If there's a majority vote for a single candidate, we will then notify the candidate, negotiate hopefully a favorable contract for both parties, and then that contract will be brought back to the full board for discussion and ratification. If at the conclusion of our discussions this evening, we have not reached a majority vote on a single candidate, we can request that the screening committee reconvene and request that they bring any additional candidates that they feel that they deem appropriate to be interviewed as well. We could also include any one of the 3 members that we interviewed for a second interview, if we so chose. If at the end of that process, we haven't reached any conclusion, then we would go out to a new search. And talking with the consultant, I hope we don't reach that point because, in his words, that would be an effort in futility because he doesn't think the pool would change, it would actually shrink. And so he would be strongly against that, but we'll see where it goes. It'll take its own course. The board, as I mentioned, the board cannot review the resumes received by the committee. We have it, leave it to their discretion to deem who might be appropriate should we reach that conclusion to bring forward for additional interviews. So that's where we are tonight. Now, we have a couple of ways that we can get at this, and I'll leave it to you guys to help me figure it out. We have 3 candidates. We could take one candidate and each of us discuss the pros and cons of that candidate without casting a vote, yea or nay, but just discuss how we see that candidate and how they might fit into this position. And work through the 3 of us on a single candidate, or each of us could take individually all 3 candidates and express that opinion. I will ask what you would prefer to do. How would you like to approach this?
I would lean towards focusing on a single candidate and then.
Same here.
Then we're unanimous. I think that's the way to do it. So, why don't we take them in order as they appeared? And who would like to start? Jeff, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, whether I go through all the strengths I noted or perhaps one and we just circle around the table here, but yeah, Jamie Errickson, I believe, that candidate went by Jamie, I believe, Jamie. So I felt that one of the strengths of Jamie was that he came across very professional, very approachable type of individual. So that was one of the strengths, and I have a number of others as well, but perhaps you know, we can circle around the table, as I say, rather than each of us go through all of them. Maybe we could just go one at a time through our list, perhaps.
You want to go in order, or you want me to go next?
Go right ahead.
I'm afraid you'd say that. Jamie's was impressive to me. He's a very, clearly a very intelligent young man. I think that he could do the job. His expertise is in planning. I think he is capable. Let me back up a step. We have very strong department heads, and I think every candidate that comes to us is going to have both strengths and opportunities. The perfect candidate to me does not exist. If you read the resume that was put together by our HR and Bernie, and also Mass Municipal Association, which was a lot of the input that we had in that job description, I don't know where that person is, he or she. It is a very detailed job description. So anyone that comes to us has opportunities and strengths, and I think Jamie clearly has both, as do all 3 of the candidates. So I would say planning was a clear strength. I think his ability to process and project management is a clear strength. Do I think he could do the job? Yes, I do. I think he's very capable of doing the job. But I think there are some opportunities that, when we get to that side of it, that I'd want to talk about as well. So, Kevin?
And just to build on those things, I had those same type of notes as well. A diverse background in economic development, which I think is going to be very helpful for the situation that our town is in right now with so many opportunities being out there. He was well versed in entry-level 40B mitigation methods, something that we didn't necessarily see with all 3 candidates. So I thought that was a great strength for him. And finally, I had a planning focus with an emphasis on measured approach to budgeting and forecasting. I think that when he talked about the way that he would manage the projects that he was proposing or going through, he had a very structured way of identifying how they were laid out and how the planning process looked way before the first steps were even taken for execution. So very detail-oriented. Really like those things about him.
So my list of strengths are, I think, consistent with that, Kevin.
Nice to see that we all have notes.
I felt for most of the conversation, he was very articulate. There were times that perhaps he went on a little bit further than was necessary. But aside from that, I felt that he had a very good grasp of the subject matter in general. Economic development, as you had mentioned, I think is a strength. Project-based budgeting, planning, and management. Housing development, including the 40Rs and the 43Ds. managerial experience, albeit not town administrator experience, but managerial experience, and that he does have a staff of 12, over 12 full-time employees that are direct reports. And negotiation experience in the context of the economic opportunity areas in Everett that he had worked on. So that's my list of strengths, if you will. So, you know, as Jim had said, definitely has some relevant, very relevant experience. Perhaps hasn't touched all the bases, but very good experience nonetheless.
Opportunities.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, you know, he hasn't been a town administrator, and that's not a prerequisite for the job. One of the candidates had prior town administrator experience, actually mayoral experience, but it deserves at least to be recognized. And municipal budgeting, planning, and management, although Jamie does have a certificate in local government leadership and management, he's never been responsible for an entire budget. He's been responsible for project budgeting, those types of things, but not
Right.
necessarily an entire budget.
I try to look at these things in three layers. The first layer is does the candidate have the basic skill sets to do the job? And by that I don't mean necessarily a resume, but the basic skill sets. Anyone can put together a really glamorous resume. It's important and it's a factor, but the next tier to me is more important, which is what I would call life experience. What have you done with that resume? How have you used your skills and demonstrated those skills in a functional way within a community, or other businesses as well? Just, you know, call it work experience. Jamie has a good deal of work experience. The one item I didn't feel that he had a chance to be exposed to is he has been, to me, and I may have misread some of the points that he was making, because clearly he's had presentations, he's met in front of groups, he's managed large projects, he's dealing with a representative town meeting, not an open town meeting, and there is a huge difference. What I didn't see in him, and it's just an opportunity from my perspective, is that we're a small community, we're not a Natick. And the town administrator's job is a hands-on job. It's, I would use the analogy of that, you know, you can be the planner behind the lines in a military campaign, or you can be the guy in the trenches getting shot at. He's never been in the trenches and been shot at. And that's the real life of the person that lives up in that office. I don't know that he can't do that. I'm not saying that, but I didn't see it in his resume and I didn't hear it in his presentation. That doesn't mean he can't do it, but that's an opportunity for me, is and a question mark is whether or not he can fill that role, and I think that's a critical role. I mean, this is a job where you got to get in the truck and go with the DPW director in a storm, and you've got to go to that disgruntled customer or citizen, I should say, that doesn't like Lake Street, you know, or the Large Street Bridge. You know, I mean that's the way it is, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the way it is, and,
Right.
and people have a right to express those views. I don't see that part in him. He could rise to that. I don't know. I just don't know. That's a question mark for me. So.
And just to echo that, I mean, I had the same thing listed here as my main opportunity, in that he has a great base of knowledge, he has a great education, he has a great theoretical application of those skills, but that's what they are right now, they're theoretical application. We haven't seen what they've done when applied to a real life situation. And like you said, maybe there's an opportunity there. When he does get into that situation, he's going to fly and flourish, but I think given the situation that we're in right now, that may not be a risk that we necessarily need to take at this time.
Well, I don't think that the town administrator is going to get a honeymoon. And, you know, it is always human nature for those that have agendas, and I don't say this in a critical way, to take advantage of a new opportunity. It's normal. It's a normal business process. And I have not seen anything that tells me he has that experience. And I say, I don't. Doesn't mean that he can't withstand the blows, but I haven't seen that. So I agree with what you've said. So I don't know. That's a question for me. But could he do the job? Yes, I think he could. He seems like a delightful man. I will say, he made a statement that I don't think he meant to say when he was talking about this is his opportunity. And I could tell by his body language that he regretted saying it after he said it. But he said, this is a stepping stone for me.
Yeah.
And, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we go into this knowing that there's another job after this with him. And that's normal, quite frankly, in Norfolk. I mean, we've been through, 4 assessors? People do use us because we're a small town. We are used as a stepping stone for people to go on to bigger and better things. And I wouldn't begrudge him that. But it's good to know that.
Mhm.
So, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you gentlemen. I mean, there's always a question of, is the individual close enough to the action, and is the action, how does that action, how does it compare and contrast to what we anticipate for the town administrator, for the town of Norfolk? So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a if not a concern, an opportunity, if you will, as we compare and contrast the different candidates. So, yeah, fair enough.
The other comment, and I'm not saying this is a strength or a weakness, because I really don't know, because I don't know him well enough to know this, but style is important in many respects, because we have a culture here in Norfolk, and, regardless of how anyone may or may not view Mr. Hathaway, Mr. Hathaway was here for 14 years, and he established a culture in terms of how we work within the community. And I would want to see, it doesn't mean we can't mold or build on that culture. I'm not suggesting it has to stay entrenched in the way it is, but you don't want to put someone in there that is a polar opposite of that culture. And Jack had an open door, and I don't know how, I'm not saying this is a pro or con to any of the candidates, but you don't want someone that won't talk to the public, that has a closed door, that won't open their door to employees when they have issues and so on. And I'm not suggesting either 3 candidates would be that way. But that is important, I think, to me, that whoever we put in this position, whether it be one of these 3 or whoever it might be, that they are comfortable in the culture, that they're not disruptive to that culture, that they'll provide corrective direction to employees when they need it, and that they'll support the employees when they need it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, and Jack did that. I'm speaking that in sort of general terms, that I think that's an important consideration, so. Any other comments on candidate 1?
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is, Jack was able to bring humor to,
Yep.
I think, that office, and try to make light of sometimes, things that could be serious, but trying to, I guess, keep the stress level down in situations where perhaps that stress would be counterproductive and lead to maybe bigger issues. And he's able to kind of manage that at times through humor. So, I think that's a good quality to have. I mean, some people are able to do that better than other people in terms of their use of humor, and Jack had a particularly good way of doing that.
And he could make fun of himself,
Yeah.
which is a skill set.
I also don't want to put too much on the exact words and the demeanor that the applicant was carrying during the interview. I mean, it's a stressful time.
Yeah.
You're up in front of 3
And he was very
people,
nervous.
And I can understand where that would
As
lead
anyone
to some
would be.
unintentional mannerisms or
Yeah.
slips. So
Agreed.
I don't want to weigh too much on those types of things. But like you had said, it all ties back to the experience pool and how that would be applied moving forward.
And we can come back,
Yep.
we can start at the high level and work our way down, so,
Fair enough.
you wanna start on candidate 2?
Absolutely. So Ronald St. Angelo came with a wealth of experience, diverse experience in many different facets of municipal and state government. The leadership roles that he had far exceeded, I think, some of our expectations for what would be required for this role to be successful. He was very personable. He He had a very approachable demeanor about him. I thought that was very beneficial in terms of us being able to work through his experience with him and communicate with him. And he seemed to have a range of high-level understanding of a multitude of different departmental issues and structures. I think that as you went through each of the individual areas that we were questioning him on, he seemed pretty comfortable with talking about the basic structure and organizational base of each one of them pretty easily.
Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Kevin had said. I mean, in terms of strengths, town administrator experience, mayoral experience, economic development experience, project-based budgeting, planning and management, housing development, albeit in a fiscally challenged community. So, you know, how that compares with housing development in our community, I'm not sure. I'm not an expert myself. But managerial experience, I mean, Ron had 12 direct reports and seemed to be the type of individual willing to take on issues that require fixing. And perhaps that's his passion as well, that he likes to fix things. So that could be a strength, or perhaps that could be a weakness, depending on whether or not there's alignment in terms of goals and objectives and such. So yeah, so those are some of the strengths that I had, yeah.
Okay. Well, I won't repeat them. You know, the disadvantage of going third. I would agree with the things you said, but I'd like to talk a little bit about, because I agree with what you said, that his experience is to go in and fix things. And that sort of resonated through all the positions that he held. And I don't see this position, in fact, all three of the candidates even said that we're not a town in a situation where someone needs to come in here and fix things. Can we improve them? Can we make them better? Can we look at different ways? All of those things are clearly opportunities. We want someone that will help us grow, that will help us improve, whatever makes us better as a community. We would want the leadership to be there to accomplish that. But we don't need to be fixed. And that was one of the opportunities that concerned me a little bit. And there was that almost every one of his roles has been in that environment. And I am concerned, I think a concern, doesn't mean that he's not qualified, but a concern for me is where that is his, you said maybe he likes it or his passion, or I don't know what the right word is, but it clearly is his background. And I don't know whether that's the right fit for where we are. And so that's a concern for me on that candidate. Other comments?
I mean, as we shift into concerns, communication. I think that as we were talking through some of the questions, I feel like he started to go down a rabbit hole per se a little bit with talking himself into a bit of a corner, then having to go back to the original point. And a couple of times he stumbled over that. And that's, again, the stress of the interview, all those things considered. But I don't think that we really saw that with the other two candidates as far as differentiating factors. As I talked about a strength, on the flip side of having a high-level understanding of the multitude of different departments, I think that's exactly where it stopped. There was a high-level understanding, but as we pressed for details into financial backgrounds and economic development, I don't think we really got too much into specifics of initiatives. I think that everything was talked about at a very high level, and I worry about, like you had referenced before, the ability to get into the ground level and the front lines to be able to execute on some of the initiatives that he was talking about.
That's a very good point. I noticed that as well. It was all very high-level strategic.
Yep.
There wasn't a lot of depth or implementation information that he shared.
No.
Doesn't mean it's not there.
Right.
But he didn't
Yep,
share
yep,
it. But he
yep.
didn't share it. I agree with that. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, just back to this concept of, you know, fixing things as opposed to, you know, some type of, you know, natural evolution of things, you know, as our town continues to grow and needs change and such. So you can call it evolution versus revolution, or whatever you want to call it, but, you know, some folks are good at one thing and some folks are good at another. And I think, you know, that's what we've been all saying. And so that's perhaps an opportunity with that particular candidate with Ron.
And another opportunity for me when I was talking about culture and how he might fit, and I reflect back to the fix it versus manage it and improve it type of process. I'm not sure how to sort that through. Because you don't want someone coming in here, because we have such strength in our departments. It was interesting, a little sidebar, that, all the three candidates were talking about all the things that you could do in a community, and, they went through all that. I can't think of one that they mentioned that we haven't either done or looked at. Whether it's a 40R, a LIP, you pick it. I mean, we have looked at every one of those, and all of them commented on the quality of our financials and our audits and things of that nature. So, which is always nice to hear an outsider say that, because, when you're in the inside and you'd like to think that's the case, it's nice to hear somebody on the outside say it as well. But I did hear that from all three candidates, which was nice, and I think true. I think our department heads are very strong in their positions, very knowledgeable in their positions. When Jack came on board, Jack was a finance guy. I mean, that was his strength. Jack would be the first to tell you that he didn't know a darn thing about DPW, police, fire, other than maybe the 7 speeding tickets he got in any given year. That's a joke.
Not really.
And schools, I mean, that was not his area of expertise. He was a finance guy. He was in the mutual fund business before that, always been in the finance business, and he was our finance director. So when Jack was moved into that position, we didn't have the depth in our finance department to backfill. And Jack, for the first period of time, sort of played both roles. I don't see that need now. I mean, we have a very strong finance department. I mean, Todd's done an outstanding job. Police, fire, go down the list, DPW, Matt, and so on. Everywhere you look, we have strength. Can it be better? Can it be improved? Are there new ways of thinking? Sure. Everything changes. It's just a matter of what the speed of it is. So I'm not concerned about someone that is coming in that may have strength in 2 things and not strength in 3 things, because I think anyone that comes in here is going to bring that issue to the table. There's no one that's going to know all components of our business, to that level. And quite frankly, we don't need him to, because what he doesn't know, he'll learn. And that's exactly what Jack did. Jack became very knowledgeable with Chief Stone's help and Chief Bushnell, and at the time it was Butch Vito and subsequently Bob McGee, and they filled in the gaps for Jack so that he became much more functionally knowledgeable about the areas that he didn't come to the table with. And I think these candidates will do the same, because I think we have that strength in place. So I'm not sure that was relevant specifically to that candidate, but it's an observation.
Well, if there is a candidate that's out there who's well-versed in every single department that they'd be exposed to in this position, I hope they're enjoying their pina colada on a beach in retirement somewhere, because I don't think that person is available.
Well, look at it this way. We can then get rid of all the department heads, save a whole lot of money, because he could do everybody's job. I mean, obviously being facetious. But, yeah, you're exactly right. Where do you think he is? I don't know. All right, candidate number 3. Who wants to start on that? Jeff?
Yeah, strengths, once again, professional, approachable type of individual, articulate, very practical, really practical, I think. Some examples that he gave as well, he was able to relate his answers to some practical experiences. Had a sense of humor, so that's something which we've talked about, the importance of humor. Situational leadership to get things done. He comes across as that type of individual that can adjust his leadership style depending on what's needed, whether it's because of the situation or the particular individual he's speaking with. He comes across as that type of person that can do that well. Economic development experience, project-based budgeting, planning, management, operating budget of $17 million, capital budget of $5 million, managerial experience, 6 department heads, water supply experience, both from a management and conservation standpoint, which we know that water is increasingly, I won't say an issue, because I think we're going a long way to addressing our short-term requirements, but we still are going to have longer-term issues to deal with. So certainly helpful. So that's my list of strengths to kick it off.
He was certainly different than the other two candidates. Well, each of them were individually different. That's not a fair statement. They all had different qualities that they brought to the table. And you're getting exposed to it a little bit, DPW jobs are not easy. They are tough jobs. You are, there's this image, I think, that DPW, oh gosh, it's a tough job.
Yeah.
And you've gotten that exposure as well. You're managing a very diverse group of people with very diverse interests, not always serving the best interest of the town. And you have to be able to manage that. One of the things that I'm a finance guy, so I look to that finance experience, even though I agree we have the depth and strength behind us on that. He has a surprising amount of that. He actually manages right now a bigger budget than the town administrator will. The town administrator, we have a $40 million budget, but the amount that the town administrator actually oversees is about $12 million. That's it. It's police, fire, town hall. We don't have any say in schools. We don't have any say in the fixed costs. You take all of that out, and you're dealing with a $12 to $15 million budget, and even that is compiled by your department heads, as opposed to by the town administrator, while he does oversee it. So candidate 3 has actually done pretty well on the financial side. I think he has that expertise. Part that didn't come out in his interview, which is in his resume, is this man has spoken before Congress. He's also the chair of the planning board in Millis. So there's a level of professionalism to him that clearly, I think, I felt it, but sometimes the humor and the style can kind of hide that to a certain degree. But the resume says differently, that there's a lot of that there. So I think DPW is all about project management. Practically everything they do is project management. So he has that skill set. I believe he has the financial skill set, although clearly not a financial director, but he is not coming ignorant of that process. I didn't get a good feel for his management of the department head component, because we really didn't ask him any of those questions. I assume he does it well, but we didn't. I don't recall, when I went back, I've watched the tape 3 or 4 times, and we did not get into that for some reason. And we really didn't get into it with any of the candidates about, their view of how they manage their people or stuff. We talked about management style and things of that nature. I don't say that as a negative, I just don't know. But knowing what it's like to manage a DPW director, another quality is that he blended a nice element of humor with a firmness, and we need that firmness side. We need someone that can, as I said earlier, that can redirect our employees when they need to be redirected, but also stand up for them when they're being unfairly or unjustly attacked for whatever reason. And we all know that happens more often than we'd like it to. I think the public would be shocked if they saw some of the communications we get from folks over the years that are disgruntled for whatever reason. Not everybody approaches it in a professional manner. And you have to be able to deal with that. We have to be able to deal with it, but it's harder on an employee. And I think it's the role of the town administrator, and I think the role of this board, by the way, to support our employees when that unjustly happens. But I slide up. But I want someone that'll do that, that will tell you when, hey, Sue, you need to rethink how you're doing this, and we need to chat and find a better, I'm picking on Sue. But also stick up when it needs to be done, when she's unfairly, or any employee is unfairly criticized. I had a feeling he would do that. And in the DPW world, I don't think he could live or survive in the DPW world without having to do that. Because it's a tough neighborhood, as you know. Yeah. And we're dealing with, what, a $2.5 million budget?
Yep.
And he's dealing with a $20 million budget. So exponentially, do the math.
Right.
Yeah, it's a tough job.
So along the same lines, I had engaging, interactive, great interpersonal skills. There was a piece of it that I kind of attributed to being at the end of a long night, and I imagine everybody was a little bit looser.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But
Yeah.
the benefits of going last, I guess. He had a clear expertise in all things DPW related, water management being a huge plus given the situation that our town is looking at going down the road. And in addition to what you guys have already mentioned, he had an expansive base of knowledge in our community and the issues that are relevant to us specifically, whereas I think the other two candidates were speaking hypothetically in some of the situations. He was able to relate specifically to issues that he knows that are facing us right now. So I felt that relatability was fantastic and really tied him into the kind of things that we're going through. So I enjoyed that piece of his interview.
And I would add to that, he not only has that capability, but he knows the community. He knows the surrounding communities as well.
Right.
And he has established relationships in those communities, which I think is beneficial, you know, in terms of going forward. That can be a plus, and, you know, that he's here. And this isn't necessarily a reason to say yes or no, but he made it very clear that, you know, he lives in Millis. That certainly cuts down the commute. Unless we fix the bridge again, then it'll take him a while. No, that's a Millis bridge, so they'll have to fix it. But that knowledge of the area, to your point, Kevin, I found helpful.
Yep.
I agree. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, just factually, he doesn't have the TA experience, the town administrator experience, municipal budgeting, planning, and management, as was the case with Jamie. He doesn't necessarily have that experience in terms of putting a town-wide budget together, even though, as Jim said, fair enough, he's had significant responsibility both in terms of operating budgets as well as capital budgeting. So, you know, fair enough, that's all true. And he also has the certificate in local government leadership and management, which, you know, I think would be helpful for this type of role. It's interesting that two of the three candidates, both Jamie and I guess Brutus, he goes by Brutus, Robert, so they both have that certificate. And housing development is, you know, I think an opportunity for him, although, you know, he does serve on the planning board, so even though the 40B type projects and such go before the ZBA, he's got, you know, experience with development from a planning board standpoint, and obviously being in charge of the DPW, I mean, he's dealing with the types of things that Bob McKee deals with in this town in terms of new development and having to make provisions for developers for successful projects. So he's all around it, even though I don't know that he's had a formal responsibility in terms of housing development with 40Bs and those types of things.
Did you want to add anything, Kevin?
Nope.
The only thing I would add to that, again, getting to the style component, he is someone that I am convinced would have no problem in getting in the truck with Bob McGee. Bob would probably have to fight to keep him out, be my best guess, during a storm, and doing things that Jack did, and, you know, going down to Lawrence Street Bridge and being engaged in the events that go on within the community. And he also strikes me as somebody that would not be disruptive to things that work. He may not bring the expansive knowledge base that, say, a Jamie does, and sort of the creativity of things we haven't thought of. I think Jamie brings that to the table. He's been in a bigger town. He's seen more of that. But I think Robert would be more, I think he would fit well culturally within the organization. I saw a lot of, you know, that humor that it was, and you're right, it was the third candidate, and it was late at night, and we'd all been here for about 3 hours, and he'd probably been in the hall for 2 hours. But he does, you know, that's a healthy thing to, you know, bring. Jack was extremely good at town meeting and having that humor. Mm-hmm. It can diffuse uncomfortable situations, and Jack did that well, and I think Robert could do that well. And I think he's tough. Yep. He's got to be tough to live in the DPW world. I don't think he'd be easily coerced or intimidated. So I too think he could do the job.
Well, as we shift into opportunities, because it sounds like that's the direction that we're going,
Mm-hmm.
I actually cited that toughness as a possible concern. In many of the interactions that one has with residents, there's a certain level of want to say accommodation, but essentially listening more and being able to address concerns in an amicable fashion. And, you know, a lot of that toughness we saw come out in his interview, I don't know if that necessarily would have come out at the wrong time or be incorrectly applied to those interactions, but there was a possibility there. And, you know, when you see that kind of toughness, you think about how it would impact both sides of those conversations. We talked about economic development. While this was a strong suit with two of the other candidates, obviously not something that is required, but just something that wasn't as strong in his experience set. The mitigation of affordable housing situations, he was able to touch on a couple of high-level mitigation methods, but again, not like the other two candidates that we spoke to.
More?
For right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, Kevin, the thing is, we go through this interview process, and, you know, an interview is an interview, and the real world experience and really having a look to see how people react in certain situations. I mean, I think we've seen, particularly in recent years, how patience is very important in this role, and it's very difficult to assess something like that just based on an interview in terms of, you know, people's patience, you know, dealing with the public or what have you. And so that kind of plays into what you're perhaps describing when you talk about toughness and such,
Absolutely.
maybe a toughness patience type of thing, yeah.
It's interesting, because I understand what you're saying, but I saw him in a different way. I didn't see what I say, I don't interpret what I view as his toughness as being in the way of having an understanding or a compatible, friendly way of dealing with issues. I actually saw him the other way. He used some examples. One which I thought was really terrific about, you were asked a question, I think, about communication. And his answer to that, I thought, was excellent. He said, well, you know, we have people that are on Facebook. You know, there's a contingency of our community that do that. There's another contingency of our community that are not on Facebook. There's a contingency that think that the Gazette is something they're supposed to use to start their fireplace with. And there are other people that read it every time it shows up in their driveway. And we have people, believe it or not, that don't have computers. And we have to serve all segments of that community. And I compliment you in helping us get to that one part that I think we were a little weak in. And I mean that sincerely. I think that's a very good thing. But he pointed out we serve all segments of that. And the toughness that I saw was a good toughness, because he has the down and dirty trench experience that Jamie does not, for example. He's been in that neighborhood, as he put it, where no matter how hard you're notified, I thought it was a great analogy, where no matter how many times you knock on the door and how many times you deliver the certified letter and say, we're going down your street and we're going to be doing this and we're going to be doing that, and then the first time you remove the sidewalk, you know, these 17 people come running out of the house, want to know what the heck you're doing. And, I think Bob McGee can relate to that, and I'm sure now that you're working, Bob, you can relate to that.
Yes.
So you know, and that's what happens. That's real world. And no matter what you do, that's going to continue to happen. And I don't say that with fault, it's just the way it is. And he has the hands-on experience to deal with that. And while I view that as an element of toughness, I also view it as an element of understanding and compassion, because he's lived it. And until you live it, it's tough. You know, I mean, it takes some weathering, if you will, to be able to deal with those kinds of confrontations. And they happen all the time. It's normal. And I'm not criticizing the people that have that reaction. I mean, they have a right. So, but it does happen. And so I saw in an odd way as a strength of his, is that he has that down in the trench life experience in what goes on in a small community. And he's coming from I don't know how big Franklin is, but, 30,000, something like that.
30,000,
Yeah. And I talked with, I sought out some references that were not part of their reference list on each of the three candidates. And spoke to, I know some people over in Franklin. I had to seek out I didn't know anybody in Natick that could help me, but I did know some people up in Southwest, I don't want to say South Richmond anyway. And they all had good things to say. But one of the things that I heard about Robert was reinforced what I was just saying, that firsthand experience of dealing with the public in uncomfortable situations. which I think happens a lot with DPW, that he handles it very well. That he's good on his feet about
Yep.
that.
And I don't want to cast a negative light. I want to
No,
just
you didn't.
identify things that identified a cause for concern in different points. They could absolutely not even really be there, but I think it's important that we highlight them, at least from
Agreed.
each of our individual perceptions of the interview. One thing I will say is that when we asked him about his plans for resident engagement and how he would approach those kind of things, he did go over, and it could have been in jest, but he did say, I have no problem going to the senior center and going to somebody at a table and say, what's your problem? And could be funny, could be joking, like, hey, it's good that he's getting out there and is asking somebody those kinds of questions. But for somebody that's got in the back of their mind that he has this little bit of grit or toughness to him, I don't know if that's something that would actually come to fruition. And having
I
spent a little bit
remember
of time
that.
at the Council on Aging and the Senior Center, I want to make sure that those interactions are.
Yeah, I think that was a glib remark, that,
Yep.
it was said more in jest, but I did pick up on that
Yep.
too, yeah. That was a fun, but I've not heard anything, and granted, it's a limited, I've only talked to 2 people over in Franklin, but I didn't hear anything like that. I did hear a story recently that was told to me by one of the people that reports to Jeff Nutty, that works well with him, that I have gotten to know over the years. He told me a story that the McDonald's on 140, I think it's 140, by Shaw's, down by over by the car wash. Had a fire recently. I don't eat too many lunches there, so I don't know, but apparently they were shut down for a while because of a fire. And then recently, they had a water line break. And so Robert brought his crew down, and what they discovered was that the issue was not on town property, that the issue was on McDonald's property. We've been there before, haven't we? Where, it's on the homeowner's property versus the town's property. In that particular situation, he had the equipment there, he had his work crew there, he went and fixed it. Just got it done. Because the alternative would have meant that McDonald's would have had to shut down for a period of time, because I guess it didn't have any water, is what I was told, anyway. And he felt that because they had already experienced a shutdown from the fire to whatever that was, he said, my crew's here, it's not a hard work to do, we can fix it quick. He fixed it. Not a lot of people would have done that. They would have been by the book, which is, it's your land, your problem. That's just an example that was shared with me recently. So, and I would hope that, to me, that's what, Franklin's a bigger town, but in Norfolk, we've always kind of done that. We've always tried to help each other and support each other where we can. I mean, sometimes it's clear cut where we have to delineate who owns what and what belongs to what, and but we're applicable and we're reasonable and we're fair if we can do that. I've found that most of the people that work in this town, if not all of the people in this town, have that attitude. That we're here to help. We're here to help people, and we don't always agree. It's okay. We're not always right. Certainly speaking for me, I would acknowledge that. But I hope we don't ever lose that, where we're small enough, a community, and that I hope we never lose that feeling of helping each other and camaraderie. And I see a lot of it in Norfolk. In the 30-some-odd years I've been here, I've seen many, many examples of how the town rallies around people in need. And, we still do Memorial Day parades and things like that. I hope we never lose that, because I think that's a core value of a small town like Norfolk. And we all know what goes on around us, in the federal government, and, it's everybody's mad, everybody's angry, and entrenched in their views, and I hope we don't fall into that trap. I know that's my wish of the day, I guess. But and so when I look at someone that will be in that leadership role, I would hope that I would have someone that would emulate that feeling. That we are a community, that we're here to help, we're here to support people. We won't do everything they want. We can't. We won't meet every expectation. It's impossible. There will always be those that disagree, think we make bad decisions. It's life. It's life. But if we follow the right process, and we make the decisions based on the right values, we'll be more right than wrong. And so I'm hopeful that whoever we choose will have those values, because I think that's the core value of the town. It's a good town. It's a wonderful place to live, full of lots of great people. And I would hate to see us lose that. So I'm hoping that, and I think Jack emulated that, by the way. I mean, he genuinely cared about Norfolk. Perfect? No, none of us are. You know, none of us are. We all have our opportunities and our weaknesses and strengths and what have you. But I don't think anyone would argue whether they like him, didn't like him, agree with him, or didn't agree with him. I don't think anyone argued that he didn't care about the community. And so I'm hopeful that whoever goes into this role will grow into that same feeling, because I think that's a value that's important to us. We're small enough to keep that. You know, I don't know that it can live in a 30,000 person community with all the commercial and all of the issues they deal with. But it can thrive here. And I just hope we don't lose it. So yeah, he's, as I said at the beginning, there's no perfect candidate, so I think it's an issue of who we think brings the best opportunity to fulfill whatever each of us have expressed in terms of our desires for this person. So where are we?
Well, maybe the first question that we should answer, collectively, is whether we feel that there is at least a candidate that we would be comfortable awarding the position to. Could be more than one, but are we in agreement that we're in a place that we can move forward with at least one of these candidates?
You want to answer that first?
I believe the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Potentially.
I agree. I think we have the opportunity. I agree. I think there's the potential for a town administrator in this pool. All right, so how do we work it through? And we can stay until midnight for all I care. Let's work it through. Suggestions on how we do this? So we're in agreement that we potentially have a candidate here that we would consider as town administrator. Oh, that's a good way to put it. It's a good start. Well, let me ask this. We have 3 candidates. Is there any candidate that you feel would not be a good fit for the community? Doesn't mean they're not a good candidate, just might not be a good fit for the community. Is that a fair question? Maybe that's a way to start. Or maybe worded another way, which candidates do you feel are viable considerations? We'll get to the same answer either way.
Well, hopefully I can assist with cutting this down a little bit. I would propose that candidates 1 and 2 are not a good fit for our community.
Well, that only leaves one option.
It does.
I agree with number 2. I don't think that's a good fit for the community. I could see number 1 doing it, but I agree with you. I think number 3 is the better candidate.
I felt that 1 and 3 were viable candidates, so I think we're on the same page. Yeah.
So we've eliminated candidate number 2. Okay, so now we're down to 1 and 3. You think 1 is not, so.
I think he is a strong candidate, somebody who's going to do very well in probably whatever he goes into next. But I think given what we have to choose from at this time, there is a better fit out there.
Well, I have to say I agree with you. He is a good candidate. He's incredibly bright. As I said earlier, I see, I'm not sure that he's a down in the trench, get in the car, drive around the neighborhood kind of guy. If you could put him in the back room, you know, to use a military analogy, he would be in the general's staff planning the attack, and it would probably be a brilliant strategy.
Right.
But nobody's shooting at him.
Yeah. You keep using the shooting at analogy. I worry that whoever we choose is going to come in with Kevlar on their first day.
One never knows. Why do you think we have the police chief here tonight?
Gosh.
So I would agree. I think, you know, do we have, you and I are in the same place. Do we think number 3 can do the job? What do you think?
Yeah,
You're in the same
he's my
place?
top candidate, yes.
All right, so here we are, number 3.
Agreed.
That being said, I would like to propose that we request 2 more candidates be brought to us from the search committee to compare and contrast against candidate number 3 for one final review. I think that the gap between candidate 3 and the other 2 was wide enough where I would just like to compare and contrast against 2 other candidates to see how they fall into that line. Not to discredit the work that was done by the search committee. Truly appreciate everything that was done. I can't really express how appreciative we are of all the work that you did and the time you put in. But for my own basis of knowledge and for the long-term ramifications of the decision this is going to be and what it's going to mean for the town, I just think that I would like to see candidate number 3 compared against 2 other individuals.
Okay, Jeff?
So are we talking about from the existing pool of resumes? Is that what you're thinking?
Correct.
So in terms of the additional interviews, these would be interviews that we would do. Are we thinking that prior town administrator experience or something like that would be a prerequisite? I mean, what is going to differentiate the candidates, the additional candidates which come forward from the candidates that have already come through the screening committee and were considered the best of the group, I guess? Do we need to put some goalposts on this so that?
It's my understanding that we can't. Is that right, Jim? Our options are to request 2 additional and really leave that up to the
Right.
committee?
We don't have the right to see the
Right.
resumes.
Mhm.
We can go to the committee, and there are 3 of them sitting in this room, and say, do you feel there are other candidates that you could bring forward that are worthy of interviewing for this position? I would think, because we didn't put a number on how many they can bring forward. We didn't say bring 3, bring 4, bring 5, bring 6, whatever you guys felt was appropriate. I guess I feel they've already done that. I think they've given us their best shot at who they think would serve well in this capacity. I'm not sure that I would gain anything by asking them to bring others into the equation. And I think it's fair to say that we want to make comparisons to what other opportunities there might be, but I would view the other 2 that were brought forward as just doing that. They could have brought 5 candidates if they wanted to. I mean, we never requested one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I don't know if you guys have talked to the consultant since we last met. Did either of you do that?
No.
Okay, I did, and, he offered that to us, and I called him, and I asked him about, what he felt, were there others that he felt might be worthy, and he wasn't saying they weren't good candidates. I mean, he didn't say that at all, but he felt that the committee had brought forward the right choices based on the pool that was available to us. Doesn't mean, that's his opinion. Doesn't mean we have to live with it or not live with it, but that was his opinion. I'm not sure what we'd gain by that. I almost think it might cause more confusion than solution. But I'm open to whatever the group feels.
If you were asking for us to do that, and it was in the context of this group feeling that we really, really would like to have someone come aboard that's been there, done that, somebody that's been a town administrator that, I know one of the candidates was, but someone that had the full package in terms of the experience, the communication skills, leadership skills, and did that job, that type of job. I would say if we all agreed that rose to that level of importance, that might be one conversation in terms of supporting additional candidates, because maybe the screening committee didn't consider that aspect of the screening to the extent that maybe we would have liked them to.
Mm-hmm.
And if that was the case, then shame on us for not sharing
Yeah,
that.
right.
But I mean, if there's something like that, but barring that, I think I agree with Jim that, the committee they've identified the best candidates, and it wasn't a small screening committee either. I mean, it was fairly significant number of people involved. You know, I think I'm willing to accept the decision of this board resulting from the interview of those three candidates, me personally, unless we feel that, boy, we really want a town administrator, somebody that's been there, done that, and that's important, and we need to ask the screening committee to bring that perspective to their efforts or something.
Well, we didn't establish that as
I know we
as a
didn't.
mandate.
I know we didn't.
And
I
I
know
don't
we
think we should have. You
No,
know,
I don't-
think
I
there's a
don't
diverse
disagree
group
with
of
you.
talent and skill sets that can be brought to the table, and I think we're all in agreement on that. That's not a mandate that they have that experience.
Agreed.
I'm just, I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to struggle, I'm struggling with how we benefit from that. If we make the assumption, and I think with the group that we had together, I don't think it's a leap of faith. If we make the assumption, that I think is a safe one, that they have brought forward what they felt were the three viable candidates. They say they could have brought 4, they could have brought 5. We gave no such restriction. I don't know how we improve on that, because we're asking the same group to go back and review the same grouping of resumes, if you will. I don't think it would change their decisions. So, you know, so we're going to another level, if you will, or layer, that they felt, at least at first time, weren't ones they wanted to bring forward, for whatever reason. And you know, they are the only ones that know those reasons. So I'm not sure what we gain by it, Kevin. But that's just my thoughts on it.
So I want to be careful to tread very lightly on the border of criticizing the work of another committee, because that's truly not what I'm trying to do. I want to make sure that's very clear. From my perspective, I think that it would be helpful to be able to look at whether it be candidates who are in line with the experience set that we've seen in the 3 that were pushed on, or whether it be something outside of that. Just a different perspective and different idea of what somebody else could bring to this position. Now, that might be something that is completely outside of what we've seen already. Perhaps that could be somebody with a different background altogether. And I understand what you're saying, Jim, in that if there was that person out there that the committee thought could do the job, then they would have pushed them forward already. But in the back of my mind, I feel that, you know, if somebody had 3 viable candidates in front of them that they thought were the ones, maybe they were focused on those 3 as pushing them forward, and didn't maybe give enough thought to other potential ideas that maybe weren't as strong at the time or in that moment. A proposal is all that it is at this point, merely trying to cover my bases and ensure that we're being thorough, that's all.
Okay, I understand. So let's think it through. I mean, I think that we had a fairly well-rounded screening committee. I think we're all in agreement on that, I hope. You know, we had people that understood the community. We had people that understood the roles and responsibilities. We had people that had experience with multiple town managers. I see what you're asking, this is my view of it, I see, and I understand it, but I see what you're asking to do is what they did. And there are boards, there are committees where sitting selectmen have participated in the screening process. I personally don't like that. I don't think it's fair. Like, if you had sat on that, pick me, if I had sat on that board, I would come to this meeting with a bias as to who I thought was the right or wrong candidate for this job, because I will have been through a more expansive process than we are. And so I think we did it the right way, that we were removed from that process, that we relied and on the group of people we picked to present to us what they felt, and again, experienced people, that the group of people they felt would be well-suited for this job. I have to somehow rely on their ability to do that, or why have them? And I know you're not picking on the screening committee, I know that, I understand what you're thinking. But I'm struggling with seeing the benefit of that, and what we would gain by it. I don't see it. Now, you can help me. Help me understand it. I mean, I understand it. I'm just not seeing the benefit, because I view the screening committee as having done that. If they felt there was a number 4 or number 5, bring number 4 and number 5 on. In fact, I think we were clear about that, you know, we wanted a minimum of 3. That's the only thing I remember, is that we set a direction of saying, give us no less than 3. And if you think it's 4 or 5, that's okay. Don't give us 10. I don't even think we said that, but I know we set a minimum of 3, and I know we didn't cap it. So I just feel intuitively that they would have done that if they felt there were viable candidates. So I don't know what we gained. I'm struggling with
Well,
it.
if nothing else, what we gain by making the request is the response coming back for them, identifying that there is no other candidates that they feel comfortable putting forth, even with the new considerations in place of what's already been put before the board.
Okay, but you don't think that the action they took is in fact that statement? See, I guess that's where I view it differently than you do. I view that they've already told us that. That if they felt there was a 4th candidate, they would have brought the 4th candidate. I mean, that's how I interpreted that. Now, we can discuss it and how you feel, but I think they've already done that. That's how I'm not suggesting we can't do it again. I'm not saying no to this. I'm just suggesting that I see that as what they've already done. And I think we'd be asking them to do it again, but they've already done. But that's just how I see it.
Well, I mean, and I think that's what I'm saying as well. You know, unless there's something different we want them to do.
Changing the criteria.
You know, where we say, you know, we really should get somebody that's been at town. We should, you know, try, you know, if it takes a little longer. I'm not saying that we should necessarily do that. I'm just saying if there was something about, let's say, our top candidate, if in fact it's Bob, if it's him, that there's something about his candidacy that rises to the level that we really want to bring that perspective to that screening committee for them to take, that now changes the paradigm, you know, the approach in terms of how they bring candidates forward, which could result in an additional candidate or 2. You know, if there was some helpful perspective that we could bring that board, that might be a different conversation. But if not, you know, I think I agree with Jim that we've already, you know, empowered them to present as many candidates, up to 5. I don't know if we limited it, but, you know, certainly there wasn't a limit of 3. So I would assume that, you know, these are the 3 that they were comfortable with, and they weren't comfortable that any of the other candidates really were qualified enough to present to us.
Can you, I'm trying to help here, and can you help me perhaps better understand what you think the value of that would be? I mean, I know you've said other people to compare it to, but I guess the distinction that I'm struggling with is that, and again, I know I'm being repetitive, but my understanding, at least as I view the process that we've gone through, is that that has already been done. That they have gone through that process of picking the candidates that they feel were worthy, maybe is not the right word, but more appropriate, better suited, however you want to word it, for us to consider for this job. And if they felt there was a 4th or 5th, I would imagine they would have brought them forward. I don't know why they wouldn't, because they certainly weren't asked not to. So I see that as sort of, they've told us how they view it. They've already expressed their opinion. At least it's how I interpret it. If you see it differently, help me.
I try to empathize and try to put myself in the situation of another committee or another board whenever they go through decision-making process that we're looking at from the outside. In this situation, I would say that we had a pool of candidates come before us. We went through an extensive interview process and selected, you know, 8 of them out of looking at just paper, and then speaking to those 8, another 3. I don't know that if it was given back to us after we made a selection of 3 and said, these are the 3 that we feel are the standout of the group that we feel could do the job, and somebody came back and said, would you mind taking another look after seeing the public interviews, the discussions that were had, and the feedback that was given, if I might not have another idea of something that I didn't see before. That is all that I'm saying.
See, now, I would support that if I didn't have a candidate that I wasn't comfortable with in doing the job. I would agree with you. If this committee if we were undecided in feeling that we had a candidate that we were all comfortable with that could do the job, I would absolutely agree with you. I would say, let's go back to the screening committee, let's see if there isn't someone else that we can bring into the pool, perhaps include whoever we felt could do the job, include them in the process, and then I think it's a fair thing to look at some of those comparative situations and skill sets. I think that is, under those circumstances, I'd agree with you. But I don't feel that. I don't feel that we have a candidate. I think candidate can do three can do the job. I would be very comfortable in that job. Just my opinion. I think he has extremely good skill sets. He comes from an environment where he's battle tested, I guess. I hate to use those words, keep going to a military analogy, but he is battle tested. There's a lot more depth, I think, in this gentleman than I think perhaps came out in the interview, and you see it in his resume. I mean, talking before Congress is a very intimidating thing. Down now, it's almost suicidal, but I mean, it's a very intimidating thing. Serving as chair in a planning board, you're on the planning board.
Right.
You know it. I know you did too. I have not served on that board, but you guys know that's not always the most friendly environment to work through. And I think that he has I think he's a good fit in terms of his personality. I think I understand your points on toughness, but I see that, I can see where your point's valid, but I haven't seen it used that way. What I've heard and understood from others is that he has used that appropriately and not in an offensive way or belligerent way. So if I didn't think I had someone that, if I were uncertain, then I agree. I think it's worthy of saying, well, let's just take a little deeper look and go to Plan B. I don't feel that. So that's why I'm struggling, why we're asking a group of people to bring forward people that they didn't feel were worthy of being, bad word, and met the same level of criteria that the three they did bring forward. There was obviously a gap between 3 and 4, or they would have brought 4. Or 4 or 5, take your pick. Whatever that gap was. I'm not sure gap's the right word, but they felt for whatever reason these 3 were the 3 that they thought were best suited for this opportunity. That's how I read what that committee brought forward. I don't know what we gained by going asking them to rethink that.
Over the course of the last hour and a half or so, right, we've talked about our feelings and our perception of the different traits and skill sets that each of the candidates brought to us. In that conversation, I imagine that it's come up, like really where we are aligned in terms of where priority lies in terms of individual skills and the benefits and impacts that they could have. Perhaps, having seen this line of discussion and questioning and the interactions that we had with the candidates, there may be something that was identified as a gap that is now minimized. No longer as big of a gap as previously identified or thought when going through the initial stages of the process. I feel that once being able to apply some of the additional gained knowledge and background that we've seen tonight, there may be an opportunity to reduce some of those gaps that may have caused a candidate not to be included in those first 3 selections. Again, maybe there isn't. Maybe everything stays the same and everything is aligned. My proposal is only based on the opportunity to get a full view as to all options and all avenues that we can take.
Well, this is a little
go ahead.
wrinkle here too. I mean, sometimes there's an either or and sometimes there's another approach, but would it be reasonable to ask the screening committee if the screening committee would endorse this candidate? Would you be comfortable with that if in fact we selected, let's say it's Robert as the #1 choice and ask for their endorsement? Would you be comfortable with that additional information, I guess? They can view the interviews and do whatever they feel is necessary to provide their endorsement.
I don't see a situation where Robert wouldn't receive an endorsement, as clearly he was identified as a candidate that met the basic criteria to be pushed on as a finalist. I think that by framing it like that, we identify that we'd either like him or somebody else, and I don't want to make that be the scope. Like I said before, I think that Robert could potentially be the best fit that we have. Absolutely. There are a lot of great positives to Robert. I don't want to discredit any of those, and I don't want to discredit anybody who's put their backing and faith behind him. I would just like to take what we've done tonight, take the feedback that we've given tonight, and see if maybe there is somebody that could also fit or potentially fit into that frame, into that template that we've created, given the new feedback and new direction that we provided.
So are you suggesting that we have altered the template that we created in the beginning?
I wouldn't say altered. I think that we gave a very basic and broad scope. We gave some very high-level skill set options and experience sets that we wanted people to focus on. But I think in our conversation tonight, we've prioritized those. I think that you said it best, Jim, when you were talking about the financial aspect, where previously we identified that, you know, a financial background is very important to the success of this position. And that was something I believe that we identified in the beginnings of the framework of this role. But as we evaluate where we are now as a town, where we are as far as our structure goes and the personnel that we have in place, we don't necessarily need a financial guru. We need somebody who's going to be able to work with the department head and a content expert to be able to put forth the best product for the town. So I don't know if that's shifted where the original scope was and maybe provided some more detail into exactly what we're looking for, but that's what I'm getting at.
Okay, so let's go back to when we started this process, and we met with a consultant. I believe each of you met or spoke with the consultant individually.
Oh, sure.
So I'll only speak to my visit with him. You guys can speak to your opportunity to visit with him.
Mm-hmm.
But the very framework that I spoke to tonight is exactly the same framework I spoke to with the consultant. And I shared with the consultant, as he, I think, asked, I hope, each of you, what are you looking for in a town administrator? What are your priorities? What is it you want? What do you see the town needs, and so on? And I shared that perspective. And it's really consistent with what I've said here this evening, because the perspective hasn't changed. I'm making an assumption that each of you did the same, that you shared your perspective. Then I'm going to make another assumption that was shared with the search committee, that, you know, this is what the selectmen see as the priorities for this community. I don't see anything having changed from that. I feel, at least from my perspective, I haven't said anything this evening that I didn't share with the consultant. Now, I didn't share it specifically to a candidate, because I had no idea who the candidates were.
Mm-hmm.
But when, you know, the question's asked, you know, what would you prioritize in a candidate? What personality are you looking for? What are the quality? I mean, all of those were part of the discussion that I think each of us had with the consultant. So I am making, I think, a fairly safe assumption that those qualities were built into the process that was shared with the screening committee as to what this board was looking for. So I don't know what's changed, because I don't think the paradigm has changed at all. I'm sure you're consistent with what you shared with them that evening. I'm sure you are, and I can speak that I was. So I don't know what's changed for the committee to view, other than to say we want more people. And I would agree with that if we didn't think we had a candidate that could do the job. So I still struggle with it, but obviously I'll go with the majority. But needless to say, we go with the majority. It's a valid point. I'm not suggesting that it's not an approach that we could consider. I just don't know how we gain anything by it.
So I know from my perspective, one of the things that I shared with Bernie in our conversation was economic development. I thought that that was a great opportunity for our town and some of the different things that we have going on. But when I shared that with him, I identified, hey, it would be great if somebody had economic development experience. Now, we had two candidates that had economic development experience in varying degrees.
Yeah, one for sure.
One for sure, that's right. Now, as we talked through things, we've established that economic development, although very strong with one candidate, was not the best fit compared against all the other suite of skills.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we were going just based on, this is the input from the three selectmen, they want this, 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 and this. Having heard our conversations tonight, somebody might not be as keen to put somebody who has extreme amounts of economic development experience, but lacking in 4 other areas, as opposed to somebody who's more balanced, That's more of what I'm getting at, Jim. I'm not saying that we've altered the scope of the position or completely changed course. I'm merely saying that we've honed in more on where those lie in terms of priority and how that blends into a candidate that I think that we all view as a good fit.
Well, I think if we had all been in the room together when we talked with Bernie, and we all heard each other's views on what we were looking for, I could support that view. But what you saw as a priority may not be what I saw as a priority, and may not be what you saw as a priority. And we may, while economic development is clearly a component that I would like to see, it wasn't the top of my list. It may have been at the top of your list, and that's okay. I would expect that what gets, so I'm still struggling with what has changed, because I'm sure that it was shared, what your perspective was, and what your priorities were, what yours were, and what mine were. Now, they were probably, brought into a sort of a cohesive presentation saying, here's the list, and I just don't know what's changed, Kevin. That's what I'm struggling with. You basically, to me, I see it as just saying, well, we just want to see more people. I don't see the paradigm having changed. If we hadn't had those conversations with the consultant, this is what he does for a living, I'd be shocked if that information wasn't cohesively presented to the screening committee for their consideration. Now, each of them will weigh it differently, because they all come from a different perspective. And they may too have their own views about what is right or wrong for the position. I'd be surprised if they didn't. I would expect they would. I don't know what we're going to change in that. That's what I'm struggling with.
I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to waste the time of an entire
not-
committee's worth of
It's not
people
about
for the
time.
sake of
If-
getting more people.
If we need
That's
to
not
waste it,
the
we'll waste it.
proposal that I'm
I don't view
making.
it, that's not a problem. I don't view this as wasting anyone's
Right.
time. If it's the right thing to do, we need to do it.
Yeah,
Yep.
so the core here is merely to see if, given the conversation we've had tonight, the direction we've given tonight, the feedback we've given tonight, if some of those gaps that were identified initially have been closed, if there is maybe an opportunity for another consideration. If there's not, there's not. That's fine. I will live with that, and that's fine. We can move forward from there. My proposal is just that we ask the committee that, based on the conversation, if there are additional candidates that they think would be beneficial to put before us.
Fair enough, and I think that's along the lines of what I had said. If we choose to move forward, albeit requesting the endorsement, it's really what we're looking for is their endorsement, because they'll either choose to support the decision or present more candidates. So I think we're saying the same thing. So I'd be willing to go there, but treat it as an endorsement, in which case, if there's not an endorsement, there would be additional candidates. I'd like to see if we could act in a manner, and if that committee could act in a manner that would provide us with a solution here fairly soon, so that we can move forward. I mean, those are my thoughts on it. I really, we need a town administrator. I mean, people are spending time trying to stand in for town administration, and we need some leadership in town hall here. So that would be my request if we were to do anything different than move ahead with Bob at this point.
Well, let me be sure, I'm not sure you two are saying the same thing. So let me try my Cliff Note version of this. Your view is that if we were to go back to the committee and saying, this is the candidate at this point in time we feel can do the job, having heard this debate, and I don't know that all of them have, we have a couple of them here, but it's on TV, so they certainly could see it. Even if it's tomorrow, they could see it. Do you feel, having heard this debate, that there is another candidate now that you feel would be, that you would have brought forward? Maybe that's another way to say it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That would be worthy of our interviewing him. I think you're both saying the same thing, but you're getting at it in a different way. What I hear you saying, Jeff, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're saying, look, this is the man we think. Do you have any, I'll simplify it. Do you see anybody in your pool of people that would change our mind? Simplistic way of looking at it, very simplistic. I hear you saying, I want to know if you think there's anyone that, having heard this debate, you would have brought forward had you heard this first. Another way to say it.
Correct.
So it's
they're not the same.
Well, it can be if it's request, their endorsement or submit additional candidates for consideration. So basically, if it's expressed in that fashion in terms of what we'd be asking the committee, then I think then they are the same. They'll either endorse the decision or submit additional
Well,
candidates.
endorsing decision says that the answer is no.
Well, I don't know that.
Then
You know,
they're not
that's up,
endorsing.
that's up to the Board of Selectmen to decide whether or not, because it's not, you know, we can continue to have this conversation in terms of at what point, because at some point, we need to make a decision based on who's out there and who's not out there.
I mean, to reference back to the first point that was made, essentially, the committee has endorsed the 3 candidates they put forth in front of us already by sending them forth, right? So I would imagine that candidate 3 has already received an endorsement from the committee. And I think the question that I'd like to pose to them is just, as Jim had said, based on the cycle of conversation this evening, do you feel there are any other candidates that would be beneficial for them to hear? If the answer is no, then we know that we're left with our candidate.
Yeah, it may be semantics, but to your point, the benefit of the discussion that we've had tonight, that's what's different in terms of the endorsement.
Right.
So yes, the 3 candidates were endorsed by the screening committee without the benefit of the discussion tonight, which I thought was an integral part of your argument as to why we should continue, is because the committee did not have that benefit. Well, now they could have that benefit. They
I
could
see what you're
endorse the
saying.
candidate
Okay.
or submit additional
So-
candidates,
So
right?
you
So
are-
we're-
I haven't
we're-
thought about the adverse on the
Right.
initial candidate as
Yeah, your
well.
point's
So
well
I
taken.
get it, I understand.
Yeah. So in essence, you are saying the same thing.
Right.
Just a different approach.
Mhm.
Well, if both of you feel that we need to make that request, you know, we will not make that a 2-to-1 decision. I will certainly go with you on that. I will say that I still am in the place of feeling that we have already done that. As I said, I haven't said anything this evening that I didn't share with the consultant, and I have absolute confidence was shared back, either collectively or individually, to the screening committee. So I don't know that we've changed the paradigm from my view. But I understand what you're saying, and I certainly understand your perspective. So I'm struggling with the benefit. So if it were my decision, I would say, you know, I would say that I don't see the benefit of doing that. While I understand it, I just don't know what we gain from that. But if the 2 of you gentlemen feel that's the appropriate thing to do, I'll support it.
Once again, I'm only comfortable with it if the decision is that we would like to move forward with that candidate, and are seeking the endorsement of the selection committee. I don't want it to be perceived as a negative in terms of that individual's candidacy, because I feel very confident that that individual would do the job that we're looking for. I think I'm trying to avoid a scenario where this board acts in a manner which is anything less than unanimous, given that this is our new town administrator. And I think that would be a very positive signal if we could be unanimous in support of whoever comes aboard.
I
So
completely agree with that, Jeff.
So that's why I'm extending, you know, that branch here for, you know, to support your, you know.
Then I
thinking.
appreciate that, and I would support, pending the endorsement from the committee, moving forward with candidate 3, if they so identify.
All right, so let me be sure I clearly understand where we are. So we're at a, and I'm not disagreeing with that. We're going to request the committee, we're going to tell the committee, however you want to frame this, that at this point, we see number 3 as a viable option to Robert to be our town administrator. And do you feel that there is, based on what has occurred this evening, do you feel that you can be supportive of that decision, or there might be another candidate that you had not brought forward based on what you heard this evening that might be someone worthy of consideration? I may not say that exactly right, but is that in principle what we're
Yes.
saying?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, if that's the consensus, I'll support that.
Thank you.
But I want to be clear on how we proceed on this. let's see, we've got 3 people here that are on that committee. What's the best way to approach this? Susan, go ahead.
I would say,
Can you grab the microphone? There's a microphone there. Come on, yep, come on up. Susan, by the way, Susan Kelly was chair of the screening committee. And Susan, I don't want to put you in a position to speak on behalf of the committee. That's not fair.
I'm just speaking for my,
Okay.
but can I just add? I would say we should meet as soon as possible, just because if candidate 3 is a real viable option, we don't know what else that might be going on with that. So we want to do this as soon as possible. If there are other candidates, that's great, we'll figure that out in our meeting. But we should have a meeting as soon as possible. And I don't know what your schedule is for.
Well, we can schedule a meeting within, 48 hours, or,
48 hours,
we can meet quickly if we need
Okay.
to.
So, yeah, I would be, say, speed would probably be
Do you have
better.
a good understanding of the points that are raised here? I mean, you're
Yes.
comfortable in relaying that to the group?
Yep, and we can go back and watch too.
Chief,
and
do you
just
feel
make
the
sure.
same?
Thank
That
you
you're-
so much.
That you're comfortable in relaying this to the group?
We'll do as you wish.
Well, thank you for that, but, you need to have a level of comfort in understanding the process, so, thank you. Thanks,
Yeah.
Susan, for that.
So we can watch the meeting again and we'll relay all these points and come back, but,
All right, so we're asking you, we're saying, Kevin, why don't I let you frame it, because you're the one that's brought it forward, so.
Given the conversation and the direction of the feedback given tonight and during the interviews with the 3 finalist candidates, we're asking simply for the committee to reevaluate the 3 that were put forth, potentially identify anybody that may be a good fit given that feedback, or to validate and confirm that candidate 3 has the endorsement of the committee.
okay. Do that.
Can I offer a slight comment on that?
Sure.
I'm not hearing that we want you to validate the candidates you brought forward. I thought what we were saying is that we have a candidate we feel is a viable candidate to be town administrator. Based on this conversation, would that prompt the committee to feel that there was another candidate that you did not bring forward, 1, 2, or 3, whatever the number may be, based on the input you heard today, that you would have brought forward had you heard this conversation? Is that fair?
Accurate.
And that outside of that, and another way of saying it, as Jeff puts it, is saying that you think, if you would agree that this is the best of what is available to you in terms of the group of candidates you had, that candidate number 3 is the right guy. We've removed 1 and 2 from the process. That's why I say I don't think it's evaluating the other 2 candidates. We've agreed that we have, of the candidates brought forward, we have our candidate, assuming there is no candidate that wasn't brought forward that would change that. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So how quickly hopefully we can gather this group together quickly?
Gotta give 48 hours notice for posting the job, and then it depends on people's availability. So you're talking Thursday night after 9 o'clock would be the earliest.
If they're all
You're talking
available.
Friday, then you need 48 hours, so you're talking next week.
Okay. I assume that would take just 1 meeting
Maybe
to make it, well, hopefully.
May want
then-
to interview other people.
Pardon?
We may want to interview other people.
Well, I
which-
think my opinion is that we should limit it to the pool that exists presently, so, there's,
Go
it's
for it.
not that I necessarily want to limit, I want to limit it in terms of the time, so that there's either an endorsement with the best information, best available information that we have, as opposed to having an open-ended process, I guess, is what I'm saying. I mean, that should come back to the Board of Selectmen if in fact there's a decision to begin considering reviewing additional resumes, what have you. I mean, that's a whole nother round, in my opinion.
Am I allowed to speak?
Sure.
I'm
But
just
grab a
saying-
mic, grab a
Yeah,
microphone.
all I'm saying is, look, it's up to you what you want to do. All I'm saying is, if you're going back to the committee has.
We know who you are, but introduce
Oh,
yourself.
I'm Scott Bragdon, I'm the Human Resource Director for the
And
town.
you were part of the screening committee?
I was
but
a non-voting part of the
non-voting
screening. All I'm saying is that if you go back to the committee, that committee, to look at other things, they're gonna look at every application that they received. That's what I would recommend that they do, and see if there's additional candidates that it didn't brought forth. That's what you're asking them to do.
That's fine.
So, but,
That's
but,
fine.
so that is what we're saying.
That's
So
fine.
it's not going out and advertising again, but it's going back through the resumes that they have. Is that right?
I know that we've talked this into a circle a little bit, and
Yeah.
not my intention, so I apologize for that aspect of it. But you're right, that is the intention.
My recommendation is that we schedule a meeting for next week. And that may put some pressure on the screening committee, but I won't be available the following week. So, and I do think that, we really should try to press forward here as quickly as possible so that it sends the right message. If we move forward with candidate 3, I really wouldn't want to create a scenario where there's a long period of time between tonight and when we choose to do that. I just think that, I think at some point there's a certain responsibility on our part to deal with these folks in a timely manner.
So I don't know what the committee's gonna do. I have no idea. But one scenario is that they interviewed 8 people. They wanna do some other interviews. That's a second meeting by them. Because you want to see people, they made decisions, so that's a second meeting. So I'm just trying to be realistic with the timing, that, maybe they'll wanna talk about it, or maybe they'll want a second meeting. I think that's gonna be up to them what they wanna do.
Well,
We have, the committee has that what they wanna do.
I guess I'm starting to gain even more concern over this. I am not comfortable with exactly what you just said. I see this, and this is where I see a difference between what you two were saying, is that we have a candidate we think can do the job. Kevin's point correctly presented is that, does this discussion change who they might have brought forward based on what they heard this evening? Fair?
Fair.
Okay. That doesn't, to me, say they need to go through and re-interview everybody in the process.
Well, that's not what I said.
I would not, I can't stop the committee and wouldn't suggest that they not do what they feel is appropriate to
Right.
do. But, this could, we could turn this into a nightmare of trying to work through this. Because I still feel that the committee's already done that, but that's just my view. Chuck, I'll grab you in a second. I lean more to the way you said it, which is that we have a candidate we like, we have a candidate that we believe can do the job. Based on this conversation, does that change how you viewed any of the candidates that you had in your pile, whether you interviewed them or not? And I assume they would have interviewed them. I assume. But that's an assumption on my part. So I'm assuming they got 5 people that they interviewed, that there may be 1 or 2, whatever, that based on this conversation, they feel now better fits the profile. And they want to bring those forward? That's what I hear. That's different than going back and revisiting the search, which is more what I heard you say, which is what I don't want to happen.
Well, all I said was,
I would not
we
favor
can't control what the committee's gonna make
I
those
understand, and
decisions.
that's what I'm concerned about, because I don't favor that. I'm struggling with the fact that I feel that the committee has done their job, and that they have presented to us what they feel are the best candidates. I feel comfortable that I gave them my perspective of exactly what I was looking for in that position. Nothing I said this evening changed from that. I have not said a single thing tonight that was not shared with the consultant. Now, I have faith that, I don't know what the consultant said to the screening committee, but I'm gonna take the leap of faith that he conveyed that. Probably brought all 3 of our views together and conveyed each of our perspectives. So I don't know what's changed. That's what I struggle with. Now, I'll support it. I said I would and I will, but I struggle with how we're going to benefit from this And I'm afraid that we open up a Pandora's box and that we start a process all over again that I don't think is appropriate to start. That's what I struggle with.
Okay, so I think that the way that we frame it then is simply to identify that there are two responses we're looking for. One is that there are no other candidates that fit the profile given the discussions here tonight. Or two, yes, there is another candidate we feel fits the profile, and here is that candidate. No elongated process, no consequent meetings, one discussion, one decision. Does that alleviate your concern?
It helps it. Chuck, you wanted to say something, Chief. Okay, you gotta grab a microphone, as you well know.
I guess the point of view that I have to give is my own, because I'm not going to speak for the rest of the committee. I felt we did that job. We did two nights, 5 hours each night, went through 8 applications, or 8 resumes, and we came up with 3. We had a significant amount of debate at the end of the 8 to come up with those 3. We felt that those 3 were the best to move forward. I don't feel that you're going to get any different view should we meet again. And so I'm saying we've done our job, and that's the way I view that. So.
And I do appreciate that. I really don't want it to come across as I don't appreciate the time that's been dedicated to this process, please. I really don't want it to come across like that.
I'm not saying that. That means we're going to meet one more time, unless we could do it through the email, but I don't think that's the way. I think we want to have a healthy debate if we're going to even go forward with what you're suggesting. But honestly, I felt we did our job, and we come up with 3 good candidates to be proposed. You all had a chance to interview them. You came up with one candidate with a reservation, I should say, but I think it'd be a good candidate. And you all said the same thing in a way. So I would ask you to just make the selection and go from there. So.
Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I want to stipulate is, first of all, supporting the words of Chief Stone. I think they're quite contrite to what we need to discuss here this evening. I was the last of the committee to be added, and that was after a long discussion with Jim. I think what's been done here tonight has the potential for unraveling the entire process. I think by moving in the direction that we're moving, and I'm sorry to be blunt with this, Kevin, but I think that, as Chuck said, we brought the 3 best forward. I know my position will be speaking in the committee, and I have no problem saying this publicly. I will make a motion as soon as the meeting is called to order that we move and return the name that was agreed to in principle by this board. I think it's bad form on the board's behalf to send this back to us. I take exception to it personally. I know if I was the gentleman who's being discussed here this evening, I would have reservations about coming to Norfolk. And I think that's destructive to the framework of a great community that's been formed here by all the people that have been here long before me. I'm just a snapshot in this community. But I feel what's happening here tonight is bad form, and I think it sends completely the wrong message to the residents of this community. Thank you.
Susan, 2 have spoken. Do you want to say anything?
Speaking for myself as well, I agree with not necessarily just poor form, not bad form. It's just, yes, if you have a candidate in number 3 that you can put forward, that actually might look bad to candidate number 3. And I don't know what else, the other underlying, what's going on in his mind, but I'm just saying from that perspective, yes, I agree that that could be detrimental to him coming here if it were I agree with we can go back and endorse. I don't think we need to go through all the applications again. If we were to do that, it would be the original candidates that we interviewed. But I believe the 3 that we brought forward were viable candidates. Our questions were not just geared towards, certain aspects of their resumes. We had questions across the gamut of, finance, economics. There was all different questions. So personally, I don't think our decision would change. I'm speaking for myself, not for the committee. But I agree that I don't believe that our decision would change. I think we brought forward the 3 candidates, and, watching the second interviews, it solidified our choices. I thought they all had their different qualities, but I would support, if you were to go with 3, that we would agree with that as well. But that's me speaking. But I would just worry about the candidate number 3. If he is somebody that you really want to go with, and the time that we're spending to make sure that he is the one, that could be detrimental to the process if he were hopefully not looking somewhere else. But if that were the case, it could be a potential loss on of a good candidate. So that's just my.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Well, there were 7 members on that board,
Yep.
Jim?
I
On
mean-
that screening committee, and we've heard from 3.
I
Heard from 3.
understand the request, but I guess I'm falling back on my original process on this. I don't see any benefit, and I do agree with Susan, I see downside to doing this. And I recognize that this is 3 of 7 people, and I appreciate you all expressing your views on this. I struggle with it. I will go with the majority. I won't make it a slanted vote, but I really struggle with this. We have a candidate we like. In fact, that candidate said the worst decision you can make is no decision at all. And I do think we're sending the wrong message. If the point is, Kevin, that you don't think he's a good candidate, that he's not the right choice, then what you're saying makes sense to me. Like that, all right, having heard this now, revisit the process and see if you think there's someone else we should consider. I would agree with that, 100%. In fact, I stated that in the beginning, that if we can't come to a majority vote on a candidate, then we should do that. I have no problem with that at all. I don't feel that. I think we have a candidate that I am comfortable in voting on, personally. And I have faith that the screening committee has brought forward a group that reflects that. That's just my opinion.
At some
You guys
point
can disagree
tonight,
with me.
I feel like the conversation shifted from me having reservations about an individual based on the feedback we had in our interview and the conversations we had tonight, to the point where I didn't feel 100% confident in pushing him forward. So I offered an opportunity to maybe look at other candidates to reinforce that decision. I felt that this was doing something in the best interest of the town, in being thorough about the process and ensuring that we were looking at all possible avenues before moving forward. At no point was it ever intended to look poorly upon our processes, upon the committees that we've empowered to make these decisions, or any of the candidates that came before us. The fact that it's evolved into what it is right now is a little disturbing and truly not the intention of what I meant to do. So I want to express the fact that that is not where I wanted this to go. I was simply trying to act in the best interest of a big decision that's going to be impacting us for a long time. So I want to make sure that's very clear.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Jim, but I think we know that. We've been
Yep.
working with you for a
I
while,
have
where
no
your intentions are good.
No. I'm
So,
not
fair
challenging your
enough.
intentions
Fair
at
enough.
all.
Fair enough.
And I'll make that very clear. I understand why you brought that forward. Whether I agree or disagree is just my own personal view. It does not reflect poorly on your intent. That was not mine either, Kevin. So if you read that from me, I apologize. That was not the intent at all. I'm just trying to think through the benefit, the upside and the downside of doing this. That's all I'm trying to do. And again, I go back to the perspective that if and you may be there, so you can, you know, and say, okay, just tell me. If you are uncertain that this candidate can do the job, and that you want to take a look at some other opportunities to reinforce your decision, that's a different perspective. We can have that debate. You know, that's a healthy discussion for us all to have, and it'll go where it goes. If it's just to reinforce the decision, that I struggle with. That's where I'm having a problem. Because, and I don't view it as a challenge to what the folks have done. I don't interpret what you're saying. I hope they don't either. I know, Chief, you know, I don't hear that in what you're saying. You're not challenging the good work that they did or their competencies or any of that. None of that, I believe, is the case. I'm just trying to weigh the pros and cons of the process. Because I do believe that they have done what you're suggesting, that they have brought forward what they believe are the best candidates for this job. And it's hard not to question, and again, I hadn't thought of it from Robert's perspective, but I think that's a valid point. Either he is or he is not worthy of this position. You know, to me, I think that's the first consideration. If he's borderline, and you want to look at other candidates, or you have questions or concerns, however you want to word it, doesn't matter. None of it's meant to be challenging or offensive. Then I support what you're saying. But if the candidate is qualified, and I personally feel that what you're suggesting has been done, that's just my view, that's just my perspective of it, then I see more downside than upside to doing this. But that's just my opinion.
You know, it's funny, because this reminds me a lot of the planning board back in the day when I was on the planning board, with these types of discussions, and they're good discussions to have. They are good discussions.
It's a healthy discussion. Yeah.
You know, I think there was some additional learning with the people coming forward. Now, it's not a quorum, but it is 3 out of 7 people. So, you know, I guess, you know, I really would like to see us be unanimous, given that this is such an important position. And, you know, and I'm sure you want to be there as well, in terms of this being a unanimous board, right? There's too many towns in the Commonwealth where they rarely get to unanimous decisions, and then this is an important one.
And I recall you saying, I think in the last meeting that you, as we both have, you've had an opportunity to look at how other boards have gone through this process.
Yes.
And you're shaking your head saying, oh my God.
Yes.
And I agree. I've watched town government in other towns, and I shake my head too and say, wow, good luck. So I know, I see no ill intent in what you're trying to do. Please don't think I'm suggesting that at all.
Same here, same here.
None whatsoever. I think it's a very valid point that you've raised. I'm trying to weigh the pros and cons of those considerations. And I'm really struggling with it, I admit. Because I'm not hearing any of the three of us saying that this man is not a good candidate to do the job. None of us have said that. If I'm wrong, correct me. So I'm struggling with why we have to, why we have to go back and revisit a process that, for all intents and purposes, really has taken place. That's the part I really do struggle with. And I guess you can get me there, but I'm not there.
Let me ask a question, Kevin. The opportunity to perhaps look at other candidates and review the night's meeting, valid. I mean, totally valid, and I'm not critical at all of you bringing that up. So we happen to have tonight 3 people, so they came forward. So I guess that seems to be important, significant, the fact that 3, it's not a quorum, but it is 3 out of 7 people, and, they went through that entire screening process, reviewing all the resumes, interviewing 8 people, and presenting 3 people to us. So I guess, it's my hope that that's a significant enough factor in terms of your decision, so that perhaps we could go forward with candidate 3 and be unanimous in doing it. Because I really would like to avoid a scenario where we're a divided board on something this important. How many times have we been a divided? I'm not sure we've had a divided board in the months that we've been working together, the 3 of us, on any issues. I think we've been able to work through issues and such, and particularly with this one.
And we'll work through this one too.
I would hate for this to be the one, so I guess I would just ask, does that matter? The fact that we have heard now from 3 people on their own volition, you know, stepping forward. And once again, I'm not being at all critical of the process. This is, I think, a good process for the people in Norfolk to see that you're bringing, you know, this perspective here to the board. I mean, not a bad thing. Not a bad thing, Kevin.
I also don't want it to be viewed that I'm contesting to contest. That's not my position either, you know. You said it best. When we initially went over this, I started my initial statement and proposal with, I believe that candidate 3 could potentially be the fit for this community, but I'm unsure of it. And I feel that the validation from no other candidates even being considered or being considered good fits, given the conversation we've had tonight, given the scope of our interviews with those other candidates, would reassure that, would solidify that for me. And if you're saying that, you know, that doesn't, you don't understand that, and
No, I do understand that. Yeah. No, I do.
Okay.
I understand that. But I'm also trying to weigh, I've never questioned the good intent of what you're saying.
Yep.
I've understood that from the beginning.
Right.
But I'm trying to think this through on a broader base,
Mhm.
Kevin, and which is why I go back to the analogy, and this is a good conversation, by the way. There's nothing bad about this. We need to come to a common ground, and I think we can, whatever that is. If your level of comfort with a candidate is such that you're just not sure, then what you're saying, what I hear that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're saying that, yeah, he could do it, but I'm just not there. I'm just not there. I want to see, I've eliminated 2. I've got one I think could do it, but I'm not sure. I need another look at some more people if the screening committee feels there's a viable alternative. While I may not share that view, because I may have a different perspective, I fully understand it. But I didn't hear you say that. And so that's why I'm struggling with this. I do think there's some risk to doing this.
Mhm.
I don't know to what degree. You might say there's risk not to do it. I buy that too. But let me ask you to Jeff's point. You had 3 search committee members here this evening that I think answered your question. Now, that isn't a quorum. There were 7, I think. So, you know, there's 4 other opinions as it relates to this. But those 3 were consistent. Does that change your mind? Which is, I think, the question you asked.
No, it doesn't. And
Okay.
while I take it into account and I do appreciate it, my concern is still there. And
Okay.
I get what you're saying, though. I understand that, you know, if a near majority has already made that consideration and already come up with that determination, then I essentially have the answer that I'm looking for, and that should provide the reassurance that I'm looking for. Did the sit for dramatic effect.
I was going to
feel
ask
like
you
we're
what,
in
I was hoping there was
uneasy
something
place
in there
here
that would
right
help.
now, and
Do you have any
I wanna try to
music?
get us back to a better place.
No, Kevin, we're not in a bad place, please. There's nothing unhealthy about this discussion.
No, I agree.
It's a healthy conversation.
Yeah.
Please don't feel that. Okay, I am not in any way either uncomfortable or in disagreement or in any way challenging your perspective. Because I may not see it the way you see it, doesn't mean I don't understand it. I do understand it. But I do think there's a downside to this. I do think that, again, I'm making this separation. If I am uncertain of the candidate, and I tried to say this in the opening remarks, if we as a group say, you know what, we don't have a majority vote that we think this is the guy, okay, that's okay. We want to go back to the committee, we think he could be, but we're not convinced he is. While there's some risk to that message, which is, I think, what Susan's pointing out, you know, to the candidate, because I don't think any candidate wants to come into a situation where he feels like he's not welcome by the people that he technically is going to be working for. So that's one of the downsides that I think we have to be aware of. And I don't think you're saying that.
And it's a perceived downside that I've tried to dispel with every opportunity
Got
thus
it.
far.
And
So-
I agree, Kevin. But we're not on the receiving end of it, so we
No.
can't speak to that. But I agree. You've made no mention that would contradict that. Absolutely agree. Please, no one is challenging or feeling you've been unfair in what you've said. That is,
Understood.
I admit that it's not a direction I would go, because I really don't see a benefit to it, but that's me. That doesn't mean I don't understand your perspective on it. I guess, Jeff, it's really gonna be, I'll shut up now, because I think it's really gonna be in your hands, because I would choose not to do that. Because
Well-
I don't see a benefit to it.
I mean,
And-
let's
and
give Kevin a
just
chance
one last
to-
point,
to-
though.
to-
And I think they've reinforced it for me. I think, while it's only 3, I heard loud and clear that they endorsed where we are. But I will abide by the majority.
Yeah, let's give Kevin a chance to, I mean, just to circle back, I mean, you feeling any differently? I know you have reservations, and fair
Right.
enough. I mean, with the 3 people speaking, you think that's enough to get us to where we'd like to be as a unanimous board with our town administrator, I guess, is the question.
The way I view this decision that we're making right now is that hopefully this is something that is going to impact our community for the next 15 years, and hopefully more. Something that's gonna help shape the direction of our community, help set policy and set direction for us as we go forward, and likely be here after the 3 of us are gone, right? I wanna make sure that
let's
that
hope.
decision,
Let's hope.
I just want to be sure and be 100% confident that I said that this was the way that I thought was the best route, all things considered, that we had available to us at the time. That's my only position. Now, I understand the board has identified that they don't agree with that route necessarily, and that you feel 100% confident in the candidate candidate 3 that we've talked about. So,
You're never 100%
Well,
confident. It's an interview process, so
I
think
feel as
we'll-
good as I can, Kevin.
Yeah,
I mean.
and maybe that's where our gap is. Maybe we're all in the same place. It's just, this isn't a place that I necessarily feel is the right place to say, let's move forward. Maybe that's just where we're at in this process and the mindset that you need to move forward, and I just don't feel the same thing.
I think some of it has to do with the environment that we're in right now, where we know that there's so much movement in terms of these town administrator, town manager positions, and the talent pool is, it's challenged. I guess that's what we're hearing. We've worked with the recruiter before, Bernie, and, I think he understands the environment pretty well in terms of the challenge. So, I mean, I think when you layer that on top of it, and the fact that, now we've heard from 3 of the 7 individuals who make up the screening committee, and it's that same group of people that we would be sending this back to, looking for an endorsement or presentation of additional candidates, which is what you want, So that additional information, it's my hope that that's enough, maybe just barely enough, to get you to the point where you could support moving forward, just because I think, just symbolically, to move forward with a unanimous board would be a wonderful thing for, our next town administrator, for him to come into that position and have that support, and knowing that we were unanimous in giving it. That's just my personal opinion. And that's why it's worth staying here as late as we've been here, to
Yeah.
see if we can get to that point.
I'm
Because
good
it
till
is
2 in
that
the morning.
important. It is that important.
Won't be worth much after 1, but I'm good till 2. There's nothing wrong with this debate. This is a healthy process to go through. Don't personalize, please, because if anything I've said, you've felt that, I sincerely apologize, because none was meant. I don't question your motivation for this at all. We're all trying to get to the level where we're comfortable with the decision. That's how I read this. You're trying to get, and we're all different in how we hear it and how we view it. We are not the same people. So I would be shocked if we all process it the same way.
Right.
It's not gonna happen, okay? I mean, just our background and age difference would qualify for that. I mean, my tech advisor is 10 years old, you know?
Right.
So I understand it. I struggle with it, but that's my perspective. It doesn't mean I don't understand it. But the part I'm really trying to struggle my way through with this is, what do we gain by it? And I see risk as well as gain. but I see more risk than I see gain. This is what I'm struggling with, Kevin. I'm not questioning the reason. I hear you saying you need reaffirmation that this is the right guy. You need to get that reaffirmed. And the way you need to do that is by finding out if they think there's anybody else that might fit that paradigm based on what they've heard this evening. I come from a paradigm that says they've already heard that message has already been given, and that they have made that decision already. And if they felt there was a fourth candidate, they would have sent it. You know, whoever it might have been. I come from that paradigm. So that's what I'm struggling with. I'm trying to find out, okay, what we're basically saying is go back and endorse what you've already told us and endorsed. That's how I see it. Doesn't mean that I don't understand it. And that's what I struggle with. I'm trying to quantify the benefit of that process, and I do see downside to it.
I almost feel that the conversation has cast a shadow on the intent and direction of the proposal, to the point where it almost is being perceived as negative now because of how much we've gone around in a circle and beat it to death. You know, I want to reinforce the fact that I truly believe that this candidate has potential to be successful and the right fit for our town. I want to reinforce the fact as well that I believe that he was pretty well separated from the other two candidates that we looked at. And then I also want to reinforce the fact that my intent for making the proposal was to see if there was anybody else who would have fallen in that gap, or maybe had a smaller gap between that candidate and these other ones that were potentially out there, given the direction of the conversation we've had. Now, I feel like I've said that 6 times now, and I know that you guys probably feel the same way at this point, that we're just repeating each other's sentiments to try to get to a different place. And I'm sorry, but I just don't see myself getting to that place. I still feel the same way I did when I initially made the proposal an hour and a half ago.
I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I understand.
So now the question is, am I willing to move forward despite that feeling?
Well, I think there are 2 questions. I mean, first is, can we get some consensus that we want to do that? You know, I mean, that's question number 1. If we don't resolve that and that comes a yes or no, then question 2 comes into play. Cole, did you want to say something? I didn't mean to cut you off, but.
Mr. Kaliza, who's also served the committee, communicated that.
Wait a minute, you got to come to the microphone.
Yeah, no, Mike, can't hear you.
Mr. Kaliza? We're doing text voting now here?
I just wanted, for the record, I've been asked by Mike Kaliza, who's a member of the committee, that he concurred with Susan, Chief Stone, and myself. So I just wanted to bring that information forward. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess if these meetings go long enough, I guess we'll have all 7 people.
Yeah, but that
Piling in.
doesn't solve Kevin's problem. I think, I appreciate what you're saying, Chief, but I'm going to go on Kevin's side on this. I mean, I value what you've all said, I value what you've contributed, but Kevin brings up a valid concern, and I don't want to discount that. I do not. And so, you know, I want to help you get to a level of comfort. You know, but I have to get to my level of comfort on it too.
No,
So, and I'm struggling with it. I admit, I'm struggling with it. While I understand it, I'm struggling with it. I think candidate 3 can do the job. I would be supportive, and we're all repeating ourselves. I won't repeat for the 14th time. So, I'm not quite sure where to go. Jump in, guys. Where do you want to go with this? I mean, I guess we have 2 options. I mean, we can vote to see if we want to follow that process. I guess that would answer the question. To go back to the committee, ask them to, however we want to frame it, and then you guys can figure it out, endorse, whatever. Does the paradigm change to allow another candidate to come forward? That's an option. I think the only other option is to not do that, and to see where we are in voting on the existing candidates we have. Is there a third option I haven't heard or understood? Help me. I see you're getting a little frustrated with it, but you got to help me through
I
it.
know.
If you're not able to move forward with candidate 3, Does it make sense to consider just abstaining from the vote? Does
Well,
that
that's a,
matter
that's a,
in terms-
let's, no, I don't think that's
I-
fair,
I-
Jeff. That's a
no,
different vote.
but no,
That's
it
a
is,
different vote.
because it's not necessarily a vote against the candidate. I'm just saying, sometimes there's a third option. It's legitimate. It's legitimate, Joe.
But I'm gonna go sit in Kevin's seat for a second. I think I don't think you are comfortable with candidate 3 entirely. That's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. I wish this were a perfect science, it's not. And I think you're looking for a way to get a higher level of comfort. And that this is the only process that makes sense to you, or is the most rational way to get you there. Is that a fair statement?
Fair.
Okay. I have no issue with that at all. My counter to that is that I don't see that it's gonna change anything. But if it gets you to a higher level of comfort, maybe that's what we ought to do. Because I think it's important that all of us leave the table feeling that our views have been respected and understood. We may disagree, nothing wrong with that, but certainly have to be respected. And I do respect your view.
I appreciate that, thank you.
I sincerely do.
As do I.
Thanks.
I know you do, Jeff. This board is not that way.
Yeah.
I think we've all been very respectful of each other's differing views on this. And that's what makes a healthy board. I mean, I don't view this as an unhealthy discussion, so
No.
don't feel uncomfortable with it. I think it's a very healthy process to go through a thinking, if you will, of how best to approach this. You know, just because I don't agree or don't see it quite the same way doesn't mean that it in any way diminishes your view of that. But I'm not sure where we are with this. I mean, I will speak for me. I would be comfortable in going forward with candidate 3. And I believe that the screening committee has brought forward to us their best effort, and I'm struggling to see how anything would change that. Now, that's my opinion. I think you have a different view of that.
Once again, I'm not identifying that I don't believe the committee brought forth their best effort. I think the effort they brought forth was absolutely their best effort. But that effort was brought forth without knowledge of the conversation and the scope and the direction of the conversations that we've had tonight and during the interviews. Now, you could have the opinion that that doesn't change anything, and that's perfectly legitimate. My thought is that there is a potential that it could impact one's decision or one's view on another candidate. And if that potential is there, that is what sticks in the back of my mind as a minor reservation.
Okay, that's fairly articulated. Well, the only way we can resolve that is to ask the committee. I don't know any other way to do that if that's the direction we choose to go. I can't, I can't read anyone's mind, and we can't take any kind of a formal vote here this evening, and obviously, and, they need to get together and reflect on that. If that brings you a level of comfort, as you've stated, and I think fairly so, I'll go along with you. I will say with reservations, I would just make it clear that, it's not it wouldn't be my choice. I think it complicates it, Kevin. It's my opinion. I think it complicates the process. I think it sends the wrong message to not only the committee, but to the candidates. That's how I see it. Again, if you told me you're not 100% sure that he can do the job, then you want to look at other people. That's a different message, but I haven't heard that. And that's what I'm really struggling with, is that you're looking for sort of a secondary reaffirmation. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think that comes with some significant down risk. And that's what I'm concerned about. But I will leave it to you two. I'll go with whatever you two agree. As I said, I can stay till 1. Got nowhere to go.
Did you want to say something? I'm sorry. I was just staring at each other.
No, we all, yeah, now it's getting late. Well, your concerns aside, I came here pretty much thinking that I was comfortable with the third candidate moving ahead. And You know, I do think that there is some merit to your points as far as getting some perspective based on the process tonight and the dialogue that took place. For me personally, I think that I've benefited from the comments that were made by at least 3 of the members that were present from the screening committee. They're here this evening, they're still here. So I benefited to the point where I would question what would be accomplished by sending it back to that same group of people at this point, unless we really are opening up the process to new candidates and such, because I think what we're hearing is that there was a robust process and they wouldn't reconsider the decisions that have been made in terms of the candidates that have come forward. And in fact, it sounds as though the individuals present, at least, I believe they were all here for the interview process as well. I could be wrong, but I know the 2 chiefs were here. So they've really seen the interview process as well, not just the discussion tonight. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is an affirmation that this was the correct process and the decisions that have been made have their full support. That's what I'm hearing. And that's why I'm struggling now to try to see the value in kicking it back to that screening committee. When you brought it up, it was an entirely legitimate recommendation. I just question now what benefit from the input that we've received, whether or not there's value in doing it, I guess. So, you know, I personally would be ready to move forward. I would like to avoid doing it without a unanimous board, and I think I've spoken to that already. So, I mean, that's where I'm at personally.
From my perspective, it seems that, apparently to a fault, I have tried to push the process to a point where I would be able to get to 100%. What I'm hearing from you is that it's rare to find something that would immediately make you say 100%, and that isn't the case in this situation, that we've identified the best candidate and the best fit for what we have in front of us. And I think that we're aligned in that. I think that we've identified that we agree that what we've seen thus far through this process, this is the best fit and the best candidate. I think where we differ is that I propose to solidify and reinforce that decision by simply identifying that given any new information or new developments, that there wouldn't be anybody else that could potentially be considered outside of the process that had happened initially. I know I said it 7 times, I'm going to say it an 8th. It is nothing against the
okay.
committee,
It's
and it
okay.
is nothing against the processes that you guys went through. I truly appreciate the time and effort that you guys put into this, and this is solely for my own comfort in making a long-standing decision for the community. That's it. That all being said,
By the way, you've been very clear about that.
Yeah.
I don't feel any discomfort. You've been very clear about that. I've heard no alternative motivation
Yeah.
or concern. There is no disagreement in terms of your sincerity in what you're bringing forward.
Yeah.
Believe me. You know, because we debate doesn't mean that there isn't an understanding and faith in what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I would utter that, I've heard nothing that would in any way suggest that they didn't do their job from you. That, I will reinforce that. I didn't hear that, and I know you don't mean that.
Right.
So I'm with you. We're sitting in the same chair.
right,
I'm trying to weigh the pros and cons of the alternatives and what we gain by those 2 approaches. That's what I'm trying to weigh. Not as motivation, not the method or the message that's been sent. None of that's, I'm not challenging any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm weighing the pros and cons of the 2 approaches. That's what I'm struggling with, not the intent.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I've made that clear, because
Yep.
this is good, from my perspective. I think this is a good, healthy dialogue. I would rather have this dialogue here at this table
Right.
than have us walk out the door and sit in the car and say, damn, why didn't I bring up what I felt or say what I feel? That's
Right.
the wrong answer.
Right.
That's the wrong answer,
Yep.
Kevin. So there's nothing bad about this conversation. And I don't think anybody in the audience is taking it that way. I'm confident. I know these people. I'm confident of that. In fact, they're shaking their head, no, they're not, which may mean they're just going like this because they don't know what to do. Sort of a Lewis Black routine on the comedy show. But I that's what I'm trying to weigh, and I'm still struggling with it, even though I understand it. I'm still struggling with it. And I'm with Kevin. I'd like to find us a way to get to where we're in a consensus on the decision. He's Jeff, isn't he? I've always got my back to this guy. I don't know why that is. I'd like to find a way to get us there. And so I'm open to trying to get there, but I am concerned about the downside of that approach. I do honestly see a downside to it. And I'm struggling with that.
My hope is that, despite the potential negative connotations that could be associated with the discussion and the path that we've gone tonight, would be balanced by the perception of thoroughness and complete and total buy-in to every little decision that we make that affects the people in the community. I hope that people understand that that is what is directing and causing the conversations and causing the direction and causing us to go through these now 3-hour conversations, is simply because we want to make sure that we're making the best decision for everybody moving forward.
Absolutely understood.
So I hope that that balances out any perceived negative connotation, not only from those who are involved in the process for selection, but also those who are candidates in the process. So I want to make sure that, hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, well, it is with me.
Yeah.
And I'm.
Myself as well.
Yeah, so you have no issue at this table, and
Right.
folks can interpret it as they see fit, but I think you made that very clear. If they choose to see it that way, shame on them, because I'm not hearing that from you at all. I'm going back, and let's talk it through.
Mhm.
I'm going back to the original process that we established. And it was with that intent. It was to create a transparent process that, and I think it's a good thing that we weren't part of that original review process. But it would have answered your questions, because you would have seen the broader range of candidates, and, that is, some searches do that. Where they bring in all 40 resumes and they throw them on the desk of the selectmen and they say, go to it, go for it. There are boards that have done that. You may have seen some of them when you went through the process. Personally, I don't think that's the right process. I think you need help in that process, and that we need other perspectives and other points of view. And you need it from people that have some understanding of the needs and how government works in this town. And I think we tried to put a board together that reflects that. To have people that are removed from that process makes it difficult for them to relate to what the job really requires and the performances that are necessary to make that successful. So I think, and I know you're not challenging this, so I want to make that very clear. We put the process together to put a group of people that could bring that perspective to the table. Then we provided input individually. We hired a consultant who comes with no luggage in terms of this town, and hopefully can generate more candidates than we might normally get through the normal process, and I think he did. He's got a history of doing that. He's the one that got Jack to interview for Norwood. We haven't forgiven him for that. So here's where I'm a little on the edge on this. I agree that we want to be sure that we present a full and fair opportunity to weigh all of the considerations over a very important decision. I feel that we have done that we've created a process that we have been removed from. We haven't seen any of the resumes. We didn't know, other than rumors and hearsay and all of that kind of stuff, we didn't see any of those applications. I think we can all stand on firm ground there. And that we worked through a consultant, we provided input, we didn't sit down and meet with, I'd never met Susan before. We didn't sit down and give our influence the process in any way, shape, or form. Go for it. They came back with a recommendation. So that's the part where I think maybe we see it differently. And that I feel that I don't think you're gonna get a different answer, because I think they've already given us the answer. And I think going back and asking them to revisit that answer, to me, unless we're saying we don't have a candidate we like, that's where I make that distinction, sends the wrong message. I think, and I know I'm not suggesting you're saying that to them, please, don't you guys take it that way. all right, because that's not what I'm implying. That's where I have the problem with this. To me, it's saying something I don't think we mean, and I know you don't mean, is that the process wasn't complete in some regard, because, again, I've said nothing tonight that I didn't say to the consultant. Now, I don't know what he told the screening committee. Wasn't there. But I'm gonna have faith that he conveyed all of our input to what that was. That's what I'm struggling with, Kevin. That's where I see the downside. And unless, again, I go back, and you have not said this, that if you feel, I'll turn to him, if you feel we have a candidate that isn't quite there yet, and you wanna go look at other possibilities, that's a very different answer. Very different answer, and that's okay. That's okay. But that's where I am. That's the reason I struggle with it. I don't know if I've articulated that very well, because it's been a long evening and we've been repetitive, I grant you. But none of it's reflecting any lack of understanding of your point, or any ill intent, or any of that. None is there, none whatsoever. I just see more downside than upside to it. And I don't think anything's going to change. And that's what I worry about. If I thought there was something would change, and I could be wrong, and that's a fair point, to say, well, you don't know that, point well taken. If I thought something would change, I'd feel more comfortable with it, but I don't think anything is gonna change. And I think we've created some doubt in the process by doing that. That's just my opinion. And doubt may not be the right word. I'm not sure, frankly, what is the right word at this point in time.
Well, there was a couple of words that I have to now go back and dispel for a moment. The first was that I don't feel the process is complete. Not what I feel whatsoever. I feel the process was very complete with everything that was presented to you and in front of you at the time. My intention here is to add something that was not part of that process at the time, that you didn't have available to you, and utilizing something that might have not been there. Maybe it was there. Maybe everything was there and nothing new will come up with the discussions or the questions that we asked or the answers they gave. Maybe it'll all be in line with what's already been reviewed and done. And that's an easy, quick 16-second meeting saying, nope, that's everything that we had, nothing else new, move it along. Maybe that's the case. But I'm not suggesting that something was done improperly, missed, or done in an incomplete fashion. I want to make sure I reiterate that. At this point, we've gotten to a stage where, clearly there are some understandable reservations with immediately going and sending something back to the committee for review. And I understand those reservations. I've tried to do my best to dispel those as best as I can,
Yes,
but
you have.
there's only so much that words can do, right? Somebody's gonna feel what they're gonna feel, and I understand that as well.
Yeah.
Given where we are with this process right now, I think that both of you have identified that you believe that candidate 3 is the right fit for our community at this time and are willing to move forward with him. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
But I don't want to force that vote, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
To Jeff's point, that's, I don't want to force a decision that creates some discomfort if we can find a way to eliminate that discomfort. So I'm not, while I see the downside and the risk to this, I'm not saying no to this from my perspective. This is just one person's perspective. I do understand it. I'm struggling to the benefit of it. And if I totally disagree with it, I'd tell you that. I mean, we're not shy with each other. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
We're quite honest with each other, and that's the way it should be on a board. Yes, I think candidate 3 can do the job. I don't think anything is going to change that opinion for me now, because I again, and I'm not suggesting you don't have faith. I know how you. I don't blame you for saying that, because probably the way I worded it might suggest an implication I didn't mean.
No.
So.
I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Kudos on that one. I agree with you. But I'll go to Kevin's you're Jeff, right? I'll go to Jeff's perspective. We have heard from 3 of 7 tonight. And while that isn't a quorum,
Right.
and isn't a vote, and all of that good stuff,
Right.
it does reinforce for me that nothing will change. Because it would take the other 4 to be completely on the other side of that question for it to change. And I don't know whether that would happen or not happen, because there isn't a 4th here.
Right.
But, so, I struggle with that too. So are we creating some doubt in the process, not by you, but by doing this? And I'm looking at the candidate that we're considering. If I were sitting at home watching this would concern me. This would tell me, well, he just doesn't think I'm right for the job. Now, I know you're not saying that. I know you're not saying that. But I'm trying to put, if I were in that position, and I don't know if he's watching or not, I might hear that. And that's what I mean by downside. And I think someone expressed it, I don't know who did, but you know, there's no guarantee that if we say we want you, that he says, yes, he's gonna come, you know. No, I think he would.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody that applied would say no to this.
Right.
I would hope, because I don't think we've said anything that should change their mind. I haven't heard anything, and I don't know what they hear. Everything is heard differently through a different set of ears. And I still struggle with what's gonna change. Because unless all four of the other members, and I hadn't quite thought of it until you pointed that out and these people spoke, I hadn't thought of it that way until they sort of reinforced the fact that, no, nothing's gonna change. Now, I did hear that from the three people. I don't know, did you hear anything differently? Did you hear anything differently? Okay. Okay, well,
Nor from the virtual Mr. Kaliza.
well, we can't count that. That's not appropriate. You know, if he wants to show up in the meeting and express it, that's fine, but we're not gonna do text messages. No offense, Mr. Kaliza, but we're not gonna do that. And we're not gonna parade in 7 people here tonight to give that opinion. You
Yep.
know, this just happened to be here, and I think that's fine, that's appropriate, but we're not gonna log him in here tonight. We're not gonna make a display out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in favor of that. So even if they show up, we're done with that conversation. That's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are. Do we want to, I understand it. I don't question your motivation in any way, shape, or form. Personally, well, I could say I agree and I disagree. This is where I'm caught in the middle on this one, Kevin, to be honest with you. I want to get you to a level of comfort. So I want to do something to help you get there. I don't see a downside to that. I see a downside to what it is that we're actually doing, and that's where I'm stuck.
You think you may have heard enough to move forward as a unanimous board? I mean, we are continuing to.
Depending on how the other two vote, yeah.
Well, I don't want to force that vote. I'm struggling
I
not
make
to
a joke
force
to
that
try
vote.
to break.
I know you did.
Yeah.
I understand.
I
So-
don't want to force that vote on you, Kevin.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could anyway.
Right.
But I don't want to put you in that position.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to do that. I hope you understand that.
I do.
Okay. So I'm just struggling how to get there. I don't have an answer to it.
I think that I know how to get there.
Okay. I'd love to hear the answer.
And I think it happens. I'm on board with pushing forward with this candidate. I think we can go ahead and take a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Your opinion is respected, and what you brought to the table is valued, and I just want you to know that.
Well, now I'm going to have concern over this a little bit too, because I do not want you to acquiesce to something you're not comfortable to acquiesce to. I do not, Kevin. I'd rather have you hold your ground, and I'll go with you, even though I see the downside. I'll go on your side on this. If it is that important to you, I will go with you on this. I do not want to coerce your vote.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the last 3.5 hours say a different story, but.
No, I disagree with it.
No,
There's a
yep.
difference.
Yep.
There's a difference,
Mhm.
okay? I've said all along, I do
Right.
not want to force a vote that we're not comfortable with.
Right.
We could have done that an hour ago,
Yeah.
okay? I don't want to do that, or we wouldn't have wasted it, please, you know that.
Yes.
We wouldn't have wasted the last hour and a half
Yeah.
if I weren't trying to find a way not to have to do that. I don't want to do that.
I'm gonna cycle through the reassurances one more time, since we hit our half hour, and I do it every half hour, so I'm just gonna hit it one more time.
Well, wait, you gotta wait 2 more minutes before you write on cycle. Go.
A decision of this magnitude, from my perspective, is something that requires as much input and as much knowledge as possible to be able to make a knowledgeable and reinforced decision in the best interest of everybody that's going to be involved. Coming forth with this proposal was the only way that I thought that I'd be able to gain enough confidence to be able to make that decision in the best interest of the group. Over the last 3 hours, I feel like it's gone to many different places that
It has.
sometimes it definitely didn't need to go. And I think that that casts a negative connotation on it. So I want to make sure that we're very clear. We have 100% confidence in the decision and the people that were put in front of us. Thank you very much for the time and dedication. We understand that you put forth the best candidates that were there, and we wholeheartedly understand that it took a lot of time and effort to do that. So thank you. The candidate that we've landed on, I believe, is a candidate we all think can do the job and is a great fit for our town. I believe that that candidate can be successful, absolutely. I don't think that my reservations reflect anything on him and his ability to be able to do the job. I believe it may be more of my just wanting to get to this perfect sense. And I don't know if anybody's ever going to be able to get there, but that could just be an internal thing. All of that being said, I feel like the confidence that not only you two have shown in the candidate tonight, but also that with the committee members that have spoken, you know, have identified that this really is the best fit for our community, and we're very lucky to have somebody like that to be in front of us at this time. So all that being said, all those disclaimers being thrown out there, you know, I believe that I'm prepared to move forward with this candidate.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm just gonna, it seems to be an evening where repetitiveness is in fashion. It's important to me, this is a very personal thing, that it is very important to me that no member of this board feel like they're coerced to give a vote. That's just a fundamental principle for me. That's morally and ethically wrong. You know, it's just, I'm hung up on that kind of stuff. So I don't want to put you in that position, because I respect your view on this. I've expressed my view on it. Doesn't mean I don't understand yours. I think you've articulated it very well. And I thank you for what you just said. But I want to be sure you feel a level of comfort in making that statement and going to that direction, because I don't want you to leave and go home and, you know, and sit down at the table like we've all done on a given night that didn't reflect ourselves, or maybe something else that went on in town. We've had a couple of weeks like that where, you know, our poor wives have to sit there and endure the conversation. So, you know, oh my God, you know, and so on. I don't want you to do that. And so if this is going to cause that to happen, I don't want to go forward with it. Making any sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have said it if I didn't feel that way, so.
Okay.
I think you have a better chance of making him a Red Sox fan than coercing him into a decision. That's
Well,
why.
I've never felt I could ever coerce you. Believe me, I've known that. I didn't want you to feel like I was trying. Maybe that's a better way for me to say that. I don't want, that would feel like I had compromised something to me. I don't think you've been with me a little while. I've never, ever attempted to do that. I don't believe in that. You're entitled to your views, you're entitled to your opinion. I respect those opinions. Whether I agree with them or not is irrelevant. People don't agree with me all the time, you know, especially at home. It's okay. And we've had a healthy discussion on it, and I agree with you. It's gone around and around and around, and potentially some connotations that none of us intended. I certainly didn't hear any of that. It's important to me that you don't feel that. And I have no problem with you telling me you do. It's okay.
And I absolutely would.
I believe you would. You're not shy,
No.
and that's a good thing. You know, I say that in a positive way. So, where are we? Are we at a point where you're comfortable in making a vote?
Yes.
I think we got a good board, Chairman. We
I
respect
agree.
each other's opinions.
This-
That's what I think.
There is nothing bad about this discussion. I hope none of us leave feeling that. Are you here? I keep forgetting you're here.
It's okay. You do it all the time.
I
I'm used to
know,
it.
I
You don't hurt
know,
my
I
feelings
know.
anymore.
I feel badly about that. So I changed seats one time just so I wouldn't have to do that. Are you okay with this?
Yes. However, if you ask me another 3 times, I might change my mind.
I'm not saying a word. Do I have a motion?
I will make the motion that we move forward with negotiations for the hopefully the hiring of candidate 3, Robert Brutus Cantoreggi, to be our next town administrator.
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have a vote. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I think we would have done an injustice if we didn't have this discussion. So, thank you for that. Because it is an important decision. And I hope this guy hangs around for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There is
I think
benefit.
you will.
I think he will too, but one never knows.
Right.
You know, when we're all gone and some three crazy people get on the board, you may say, you know what, Lewis looks awful good. So next steps is we will, are you comfortable with my taking a initiating a contract discussion with him?
Absolutely.
I don't mind if one of you wants to take the lead on that. I'm not, this isn't a turfy issue with me. You guys okay with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So long
Yes.
as, I mean, we're able to have input on.
Oh,
sort of
absolutely.
friendly- Yeah,
There'll
absolutely.
be no agreement.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely not.
So
Absolutely.
And-
maybe we
and,
should vote on it. Would you like me to make a motion? to be,
Yes,
yeah.
actually I would.
Yeah, I make the motion that we allow our chair to enter into negotiations for consideration by the Board of Selectmen for the hiring of candidate 3.
Can I add one friendly
Yes.
amendment,
Yes.
subject to the full approval of the board?
Second.
So I will contact him and set up a time to sit down.
We have to vote.
Oh, thank you. All in
those-
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous vote. A thought, I mean, you guys, let's talk about the contract process, so we get some initial input. I know that when we went through this issue with Jack, you looked into some contracts,
Mhm.
and I looked into some contracts, and we found there were some gaps
Absolutely.
in our existing contract. We could do this one of two ways. I actually documented the gaps that I saw. You probably have some I know as well. I don't think you had a chance to do that, Jeff. But if you did.
Well,
we-
I've seen Jack's you're talking about,
No, I'm talking about, we found that there are different, the language is different from one contract to another. And the most glaring example was the very issue we had dealing with Jack. There were contracts that had termination without cause
Mhm.
considerations that our contract didn't have. That's just one example.
fair enough.
Of
Okay, yeah.
things that we never thought of. So one way we could approach this is ask our Human Resources Director to compile a bunch of different contracts from different towns, whatever he thinks, I don't care,
Preferably those that have been written in the last 5 years or so,
Yeah.
probably be best.
right?
Yeah.
You don't want a 25-year-old
You don't wanna-
contract.
You don't wanna go back to 1922. It was a very
Same.
good year, very good year.
There should be a lot of them with 100
Yeah,
people.
and,
Ah, true.
Right.
and Scott, share those, you guys, I'm sure you can get them electronically.
I have them electronic.
Oh, super, share them with all three of us. And then, if we can all find the time in a very short time frame to go through them
Mhm.
and give back to Scott recommendations that you think should be included in the contract, that would be very, very helpful. And then we'll try to put those together, bring it back to this board for review. In the meantime, I'll initiate discussions with our candidate. It's not gonna happen in 2 days, you know, and give us all the time to take a look at it and see if we can't, because I remember when because I did the same thing you did. I said, oh, I never thought of that. You know, I mean, we never thought of a, termination without cause
Right.
contract. But it was prominent in quite a few contracts.
Mhm.
I'm sure there are other things in there, Scott, that we haven't thought of as well,
Yes, there are.
that protect both parties.
Oh,
Yeah, nothing wrong
Kevin
with
and I
that.
had a number of discussions about that.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so there'll be no formal offer of any kind until we're all in agreement on the content of that contract and must be ratified by this full board.
Are we gonna wait till the 29th, or are you gonna look to have another meeting? Because that's the only meeting we
Well, I
have.
will, if agreeable, I will contact the candidate tomorrow. I mean, I think we should do that. We'll also have to contact the other candidates that were not chosen. I mean, there's a proper way to
Right.
handle this, so we'll do that. He's next door, so I don't think it's gonna be difficult to get together to have some initial conversations, but
I'm
we need to
meaning,
compile what this contract is gonna look like.
I'm meaning you're gonna meet again to discuss the contract before. So do you wanna wait till the 29th, or is that something you wanna, so that you have a contract?
Well, I'm away the week of the 22nd, so.
Let's, we don't have to finalize anything, you know, in the next 2 weeks. There's no rush to do this.
Okay, I just didn't know if you wanted to.
Do you guys see a rush to do this? I mean, when I say rush, we don't want this to take 3 months, but we also don't have to do this in 2 days. I mean, I want a level of comfort with the contract by all 3 board members before we get this resolved. Do you have thoughts?
Man, I'd hate to pull up the three of us together next week just to go through contracts.
I'm willing to do that. I mean, is that something we could get done pretty quickly, Scott? What works for you? I mean, it could be brief. Maybe we could, is there any chance you could do anything during the day? Are you
Maybe.
available during the day, Kevin?
This weekend I can review the contracts, so I can certainly do that to prepare
Today's
myself.
Tuesday. You have the contracts, so you can get them out to us tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay. So we could review them through the weekend. Agreeable?
And then it's just,
I don't have a day where I'm gonna be able to be in town,
Okay.
so it would have to be in the late afternoon, the earliest. I have Tuesday the 15th. Tuesday the 15th.
Well, that narrows it
Okay,
down,
what time, Kevin?
So are you talking late afternoon?
Yeah, so if we were to shoot for 5 o'clock,
As long as I have until 7. I have an 8 o'clock meeting.
then I'd have to go to pick up one of the.
Well, it shouldn't take long.
Yeah.
I mean, if we, certainly under an hour, I would
Right,
think, wouldn't you?
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Sue, why don't you post us for the 15th?
Okay.
I can't do.
Oh,
5
there it
o'clock.
goes, okay.
I think I'm available. I just can't do 5 o'clock.
Oh.
How about, you have a limit in terms of what time?
What time were you available?
Could probably be here by 6:30, otherwise maybe I could come in early. I could look into, maybe I could get in here at
Like in the morning?
4 o'clock.
Oh.
Well, even earlier in the afternoon, is that what you prefer, earlier in the afternoon? As opposed to morning?
I'm the easy guy. I can do anything on the 15th up until 7 o'clock.
Okay, let's do
Or
4 o'clock. Let's do
morning, or if you wanted to do a 9 o'clock in the morning or something.
Well, you have the
that might
kids,
be-
don't you? Isn't
No, they'll be dropped off by that point, so I could either do from 9 to 10 or from 4 to 5, whichever is your flavor.
Let's try to do the 9 to 10.
Okay.
Okay, done. Thursday the 15th, 9 to 10. Scott, you'll get everything out to us tomorrow?
Yes.
So we'll collectively put our heads together, hopefully be able to come to a consensus on provisions we want in the contract, and I'll plan to meet with them after that. I'll talk with them, meet with them, but I won't get into any contract discussions until we have that put together and come up with a proposal. That's a good idea, actually. I think we didn't do that last time. I wasn't the chair. The chair sat down independent of the board and negotiated all of that and brought it back for ratification. I think this is a better way to do it, where we collectively give input to the contract, so what we present already reflects the input of the board. I think that's the right way to do it, so I agree with you. Good idea. Okay, we have a deal? So you're gonna post us?
I'm gonna post you.
Okay. Well, my brain is tired. I think that means you are too, huh?
Yes.
If this was the planning board in the day, we'd just be getting started. We have another 2 hours.
Well, I'll let you two fight that one out. Yeah. All right, do we have any other business?
A motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Is
So moved.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.